So good morning. Welcome to our webinar, eSports School from A to Z. I'm Edward Robinson, a professor in Morgan State School of Global Journalism and Communication. I'm also the director of the School Center for the Study of Race and Sports and Culture. We are pleased to present a conversation exploring the ever-expanding eSports industry. SGJC is co-hosting this event with our partners at the Donald P. Belsario College of Communications at Penn State. I will share moderating duties today with Penn State colleague John Affleck, who is the Knight Chair in Sports Journalism and Society. I'd like to thank the deans of both schools for their support, Morgan's Dean Dwayne Wickham and Penn State's Marie Harden. And thank you for joining us. There will be 4 sessions today to help us kind of unpack the layers of eSports. We're going to start with an introduction to eSports, the 100 level. I would like to introduce my guest panelists here. I have Christopher Green, Game Drive LLC. Christopher Green is the founder of Game Drive LLC, a platform that provides a single source for game statistics, no matter the console or game. They collect gaming data of registered users and present it for scouts looking to recruit professional gamers. Thank you, Chris, for joining us today. I also have Marcus Howard from Project MQ. He's the CEO of Project MQ, a multimedia search engine exclusively for independent video games. He's also the president of the Tampa Association of Gaming and Global Coalition of Gaming, nonprofit organizations dedicated to growing the gaming industry and supporting STEM youth programs. I want to welcome Marcus today. Really appreciate you joining us. We also will have joining us, hopefully here soon, Danny Martin of eSposure. He's the co-founder of eSposure, a company that aids professional development of students, interns, and postgrads in the eSports industry. His students have received scholarships and employment in the industry, and he helps professional eSports players land deals with franchises. I want to welcome him as well. Want to get into it, guys. Open this up for questions. The 101 session is designed to just get a basic understanding of eSports. For the past 20 years, I've heard information in segmented ways about the development of eSports and the gaming industry. But for Chris, I'd like for you to define for those of us who are uninitiated, define eSports for me.
Hey everybody, Chris Green, founder of Game Drive LLC. Definition of eSports is pretty much taking a video game and put it into a competitive world, just like any traditional sports. So of course you have 2 teams or 2 players rivaling against whatever type of game that they're playing and pretty much trying to win for either a trophy and or prize pool, depending on the situation. Pretty much that's the basic rundown of any esports competition. Now, over the years, the esports competition has grown from winning a couple $100 to millions of dollars, and it's still growing. Biggest prize pool right now is hosted by Dota 2, which is at $40 million. The largest market's probably backing up in this single Fortnite. I think it's going for $3 to $4 million.
Yeah, Chris hit right on the nail, right on the head. It's major dollars these days, especially in those bigger publisher supported prizes or publisher supported titles for prizes.
Gentlemen, can you turn your cameras on?
Can you unlock that for me?
Yeah, same for me.
Not a problem. Is that, Sharon, are we ready to go with that?
Yeah, I'm working on it right now.
Perfect. While he's working on it, we're going to continue. So I'm a sports fan, and I know the difference between high school, college, and professional sports. How would you categorize eSports in those terms? If they can be categorized that way.
Similar, just going from amateur to semi-pro to pro. There's no Division I or segments yet, but they will be coming. Right now, with esports being pretty much a grassroots ecosystem, one, we're still trying to make sure that the rules apply across the board for all the type of games, genre of games, I should say, really. So that way we can have those certain levels from Division I or Division IV, or whatever case may be, just as traditional sports. But right now we are at the mercy of the game publishers or the game library houses like Valve or Epic to pretty much define those rules and regulations depending on the type of competition that's going on.
So after so much time, in the development of esports, you say the sport is still in its grassroots ecosystem. How define that for me, and break that up. That term is unfamiliar to me.
Yeah, Chris makes a great point. We are still kind of in day one of esports, even though, depending on who you ask, esports unofficially or officially started in 1972 with Pong, right? Kind of modern day esports is about 10, maybe 15 years old. But esports grew out of initially just being a marketing channel for games. It was all about how do you increase engagement for a title, potentially driving revenue back, right? For example, League of Legends, Riot Games has made $20 billion of revenue for a free-to-play game over the last, 15 or so years. And they've leveraged esports to drive more user acquisition and engagement and monetization. So from a publisher perspective, they're not concerned as much about all of this infrastructure from a scholastic standpoint. And that's why companies like Chris Green's Game Drive are so important, because the ecosystem is missing the type of infrastructure you need in order to successfully facilitate both middle school, high school, and collegiate esports. We're missing that kind of pipeline technology. But to answer your other question, we're starting to see the same structures evolve that you see around traditional sports. So varsity esports teams at the high school and collegiate level, intramural esports like you would normally see at a collegiate level. Those things are happening. And what Chris and I and the rest of the folks here at the Tampa Association of Gaming are trying to do is really expand it beyond that. Because when you think about intramural esports, it's still exclusive, right? Varsity sports is hyper exclusive. Intramural is less exclusive, but it's still your most athletic students in a community. What ultimately we need is a pipeline that includes even the non-elite gamers so that you can have everyone be a part of the ecosystem. And again, Game Drive will help facilitate that.
So when I hear about esports, I seem to gravitate to the games that I like. But the sport seems to be broken up into a variety of game playing. So let's kind of walk through them. Like you have fighting games, like your Street Fighter. Then you have your first-person shooter games.
Call of Duty.
Then your multiplayer online kind of battle arena type of games.
League of Legends.
And then your, yes. Thank you. And then you have your racing games.
Pretty much any Formula One, or
What's up?
I would say that's Need for Speed, but if you want to go for traditional F1 racing, there's the Formula One.
Okay. Then your real-time strategy, StarCraft.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then your sports games.
Where you have Madden and
Madden
NBA
and-
2K.
Okay, right.
So how as a novice, how am I to put my head around all of that? And what am I to understand about how all of those people are competing, and how is this culture evolving? What am I to understand about all of that? It's a lot. And you could take it in pieces. We don't have to answer it in one big question, but it's a lot there for me to just understand.
So same thing as traditional sports. We have our segments: basketball, hockey, soccer, football, racing, and all those type of categories. Esports is the same way. We just have more categories based off of the certain games. So real-time strategy, first-person shooter, of course, fighting, and so on and so on. So the same esports pretty much took the same segments as traditional sports, just placed them in the same categories with the type of games that either people will play or people have are enjoying. So the same culture, let's say for football, same people who want to play football, grew up playing football throughout the years, may or may not have got a chance to play football within their high school, collegiate, whatever case may be, still have the opportunity to still engage with their community with playing Madden and any other type of football games that are out there. So it's pretty much, like I said, same things that have been placed in for traditional sports. We just took that cookie mold and placed it with video games, which is now esports, and has added the categories where the other games will fit, so that way the community can participate, engage, and more.
I agree with that. I think to take it a bit of a step further, not only is all of that right, but I think it's even more complex than traditional sports for two reasons. Namely, number one, you may just have football as just the football genre. If we're talking about genres like basketball is a genre, baseball is a genre, but when you look at first-person shooters, you can have multiple games within that genre, right? There's Madden. Sorry, that's a sport game. That's Halo. That's Call of Duty, right? You could have a number of Valorant, new games are popping up all the time.
Yeah.
And a great example of the second point is that the rules are always changing, right? The rules for football pretty much are always the same. Basketball, baseball, hockey. They rarely change. And if they do change, it's a minor change. With these games, every 3 to 4 months, the game could be shifting, right? What is it? Fortnite launched in 2017. It's already in its 10th season, 9th or 10th season.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with Apex Legends, right? It's in its 6th or 7th season. So every time they release a new season, there could be new characters, new maps, new game modes. It's constantly shifting.
So how does the average fan get hooked when everything is moving constantly?
I think that's the greatest part about esports wise is the fact that the challenge is never the same, never consistent. So it gives you a refresh, or pretty much your mind restarts of thinking that the same, playing field is going to be the same on the next season, but actually it's not. They can add whatever handicap or certain layout maybe change, building maybe on the left versus on the right. So when you're playing with your competitor or so, you may thinking that you're going to do the same moves or so, but then when you get to a certain point, you have to think quickly, which is great for cognitive response, whatever case may be, to know how you can adapt. And that's one thing, is pretty much know how to adapt in an environment very quickly, especially an environment that you have never seen or that you think that it will be the same on the next competition. Football, basketball is always going to be the same, environment. It's always going to be on the field, always be on the court. Nothing changes. And video games, those can change based off of the season, or if the game publisher wants to throw a curveball in it just to see how can you adapt and persevere in that competition.
Yeah, I think even more traditional esports that are more similar to traditional sports like Madden and FIFA, Rocket League, which is less soccer but soccer based, have that same component, right? You would think that Madden might just have the same rules from one season to the next, or one release to the next, but you have to remember that it's from a game publisher who is trying to appeal to a larger audience while also leveraging esports for this smaller market, right? You think about the gaming industry, it's a $200 billion market. Esports is only $1 billion market. That's 0.5% of the larger space. And as I'm sure Chris and many of the students at Morgan State will tell you, a lot of people have been vocally opposed to paying $70 a year for the same game year after year after year, for like a Madden, where it's basically a roster update. So game fans are pushing the game developer and publisher to add more features so it feels like a fresh experience. But when you do that, you destabilize the game for the esports side.
There has to be some balance, is what you're saying, between the world there. So I grew up playing video games, Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and I love playing video games. But what separates the average at home player from the competitive esports player in today's esports environment?
Honestly, nothing. As long as you stay consistent, just like as you do, and I'm gonna use football as an example. You train to, be the best, to hope to get on, the football team and whatnot. Same thing applies in esports. You play, compete, you try to keep your stats at a certain level where you are seeing that you are the number one. I'll use Fortnite or Call of Duty, to be actually honest. Top shooter or top assist, or you ranked as points. You ranked as getting as many points based off the competitions. And when you look at, traditional sports, the same thing, how many, for football, how fast are you, what's your strength, what's your, how many catches have you, caught for the ball, how many assists of your, your teammates and whatnot. So again, those things in video games, people are trying to keep their scores to say that they are, they are the best of the best. And like for my company, we are just making sure where you can actually say that, not just around the world, but actually down to the smallest demographics possible. So if Morgan wants to say they have the best Fortnite, Call of Duty players, we'll be able to show that information, so that way you can hopefully get on either a team, be sponsored by some companies like, say, Coke, a video game company, Riot, whatever case may be. So that way, same thing, those things can advance you. But there's nothing really different besides just one being physical and one being in the virtual world, to be honest.
Chris, I'm going to follow up with you about Game Drive, because I want you to open up a little bit more about exactly what type of numbers you house for gamers. But I'm going to come right back to that, because I want Marcus to address that question. Chris says there's nothing that separates me as a horrible Madden player from the top Madden player in the country. Is that, am I reading that wrong, or is that's how it is?
I think from a skills perspective, Chris is right. I think from an infrastructure perspective, and again, that's why Game Drive is so important. He's going to speak to it, a little bit afterwards. There's still a gap there, and it's part of the larger issue of the digital divide, right? I think typically speaking, as a broad stroke, communities of color don't have the same opportunity to get into esports because of the distance required to travel to some of these major events to qualify. This was obviously pre-COVID. And then the expense around having higher end rigs to, especially for PC games, right? Where you may be able to go get a used Xbox One today for 250, 300 bucks. If you want to be truly competitive in a PC game, you're going to spend easily $2,000 to $3,000, right? Because you got to have a high end rig. You got to have, the most expensive graphics card you can, possible, so you can see all the way down the other end of the field with that high fidelity, so you can understand there's a headshot opportunity. You got to have a high end headphones. You can hear steps in 360 degrees around you. So without that high end equipment, you don't have that competitive edge you need in addition to your skill to really rise to the top ranks. And that's a major missed opportunity for the space. And even, I think, larger publishers like EA or Activision Blizzard, to take Call of Duty as an example. Call of Duty is the major thing that they're promoting right now with their Call of Duty League is the PC game. Even though the game exists on the console and on mobile, when you think about the Call of Duty League and the tournament scene, they're only really actively providing and highlighting the PC space. So even though you have really good gamers on console and really good gamers on mobile, they don't have that platform to showcase their success.
Wow. A rig. What encompasses a rig, and why is it $2,000?
I'll speak on this one because I am the PC gamer, and my rig is at least $3,000. But I built mines more for an overall, not just for gaming, for going to cybersecurity, working in a lot of companies that do some more system admin work. But for the gaming side of my rig, as for PC, yes, it is a $3,000 performance beast, and it does what it needs to do for when I play my type of games. And my type of games that I play is more strategy games, so StarCraft, League of Legends, and whatnot. So if I want to make sure that as soon as I barely tap my mouse, that I'm moving my players to the next spot, or need to move the map around so that way I can see where I need to take advantage points to hopefully scout out my my competition, but also hopefully defeat my competition. So if you almost think of it, I'm playing chess 24/7 when I play my games, my strategy games. So I have to try to outbeat or outsmart my competitor. But with that, in the gaming world, you do have to have a high performance rig to compete with those competitive players. So it is going to get a little bit expensive. You can start with an entry computer or computer rig around $500 to $700. But as you're competing, you want to have a better computer rig to compete with these other players, especially now that we're playing mostly from our homes, whatever the case may be. When we get to competitions that are mostly in-house, like I use Danny's for exposure, of course, those all rigs are all pretty much all the same, so there's no competitive advantage. But when you're playing from home or so, you want to kind of have that competitive advantage with a rig that can make sure it can handle, especially that you're playing with somebody that may be your next door neighbor or on the other side of the world.
Which is where also, having, a hyper performant internet is important, right? If you don't have low pings and high bandwidth, it takes longer for your inputs to get to the server and back. And,
right.
And if there's any lag, lag is where you can get fragged.
Yep. And I've gotten that multiple times, but either way, I still prevail. I may lose a couple competitions, I may win some competitions, but at the end of the day, it's all depends on how your tactics, but also how your equipment will help make you perform. Just like, again, traditional sports, you wear certain gear to help and protect you, but also make sure that you can perform at your best possibility. And those performance gears change just like computer technology. For PC, also for console, change as well, so that way you can have those better opportunities. We've seen the adaptive change for used football from the gear that they'd be using back in the day, where it's pretty much more just pigskins, to the gear now that they can take a a good hit and reduce the concussion rate, I should say.
So I am 12 years old and I've convinced my mom to buy me the best rig. I am, competitive among my school peers. You know, I have ambitions for more. Where can I go in this industry? What's the limits for me? What can I indulge in? Are there is it a you know age ranked systems, or is it just free for all for everyone? How does this work?
Both. So for the age rank, let's say if your school or community have partnered with, like, say, junior achievements, then they'll have opportunities to compete with other um, peers that are outside of your school. Um, Also, another company, Play Versus, who's helping with um, the high school segment. Now you're able to play, competitively in esports amongst all of the high schools with that have joined their platform, and they'll be able to, again, compete with more peers than just the ones in your school or your neighboring high school. So now you're able to compete at that high school level where you're playing with all the high schools in the United States, and those companies like Junior Achievements and Play Versus are making sure that you can um, compete and advance your excitement in, or keep you engaged. Does it really keep you engaged? That way, you can also see the opportunities that it can lead you to on the collegiate level, but also on the professional level as well. And Marcus probably speak more on the junior achievement side of that.
Yeah, there are definitely, nonprofit organizations, just like any organization, is noticing, 75% of all U.S. households have at least one gamer in them. 97% of kids 12 to 17 are playing video games. The average gamer in the U.S. is 35 to 44. So lots of brands are quick to figure out, or trying to figure out, how to authentically and effectively use gaming and esports as an engagement strategy. So you're starting to see these local tournaments pop up. But you also see tournaments from the major publishers. Capcom has one for Street Fighter, and Epic Games is hosting tournaments for Fortnite, right? So it's all about kind of plugging into your local community and then researching the major publishers to see what kind of opportunities are they providing.
And are you competing for money at first, or are you just competing like you would for a tennis tournament for a trophy?
There's both out there. So there's ones for the trophy side of it. That's been, I would say, the start of it in the esports world, where you want to have the so-called trophy, or you want to have to say that you are always up top, the number one player in that video game that you're playing. The money side of it all depends on the competition, sponsors, and whatnot. So if you're at a local game club facility, they may offer a prize winning of, let's say, $100 to maybe $1,000. If you get sponsors, sometimes that sponsorship will put money in, and that prize pool will grow, where it can be thousands to millions of dollars. So, like I mentioned earlier, you know, like for one game, Dota 2 raised, and sponsorship and everything for the prize pool would be $40 million. Rocket League, not say Rocket League, Fortnite has done the same, where they've raised up $3 million just for a prize money for one player. So it all depends on the type of level of competition. Some people like to play just for to say that they're the number one and will always be the number one player. Some people want to say they compete where they always, win that prize pools of money over their gaming career. So again, it all depends on where they want to go.
Yeah,
So
I would break it down to three different types of incentives. There's the bragging rights and title, like Chris mentioned. There's obviously the cash prize, and then there's potential personal branding, where you can kind of carry that into a potential sponsorship, right? If you're the number one player in Fortnite or Madden, you may have built up a following because of your skill. And as a result, brands may want to sponsor you or attach their brand to your audience and your skill set. So that's another revenue opportunity.
I hear the word billion-dollar industry thrown around a lot with esports. What does that mean? How are you to look at that number? Is that to excite me? Is that just something? Is that the truth? And there's a lot there with when I hear billion-dollar. It seems over and over billion-dollar revenue, billion-dollar industry by 2021, et cetera, et cetera. Marcus, please talk to me about this.
This is a soapbox for me, so I'm going to apologize in advance.
Absolutely.
There is a lot of value and truth to the esports ecosystem, right? The viewership is, by the end of this year, and this was even pre-pandemic, by the end of this year was projected to be larger than every major sports league except the NFL, right? It's some of the games have had more viewership than the Oscars and the Emmys and the Grammys and the Super Bowl. All of that is true, but I think there's a lot of people hyping up some empty space just for the sake of getting dollars. So when you think about the billion-dollar industry, it's a global industry. For example, there are more gamers in China than there are people in the United States. And I have seen pitch decks where people will basically tout either the larger $200 billion gaming industry and call it esports, or pull metrics from China to use to justify the valuation of the opportunity they have in their company here in the US. And those are apples to oranges.
Yeah.
And then again, if you look at the revenue perspective, it's $1 billion, and that's great, but that's only 0.5% of the global gaming industry. And what's a heavily guarded secret in the space is the vast majority of esports startups are grossly unprofitable. Grossly unprofitable.
Now I have to follow up with that. You said the majority of the startups are vastly unprofitable. So why is that? How is that making for an industry that's moving forward? Is that just because of the popularity? What has caused that? What's the cause and effect there?
We don't have enough time in this session.
That's
you want to take a stab at it first?
What's the quick answer there?
So I'm gonna try my best, but this is a true open-ended conversation for this, because there's so many pieces that needs to be discussed. But
the reason for the question is the honesty among students who may see this as an avenue. But I don't want people to think that, okay, billion-dollar industry, let's run out and there's a startup opportunity on every corner and everybody's going to get rich. There's gold there. I don't want to create that perception if that's not the truth.
I don't want to say that there's gold there, and I'll take a stab at that for this. There's opportunities. So we only see the front of the house, and I use this front of the house, back of the house. We only see the front of the house, where we see the competitions, where we see these players from semi-pro to pro winning these competitions, winning the, like I said, $3 million, $40 million, whatever case may be. We only see that piece of the puzzle. We don't see the back end piece. We don't see the people, like for me, for data analytics and big data, working to provide the information, so that way, one, they can say that they're the best, but also other pieces, like for Morgan and Penn State, for journalism, and for like this webinar, for have this conversation where you guys and for the students can actually write one about it, so that way it can go to the newspaper segment. So sending an article about how the industry is changing, where is the money going, who's the big dog, who's the big team, who's the big owner of an esports team, and stuff, and so on and so on, who's working on creating a new video game, who's adding the modifications to Fortnite, Call of Duty, whatever case may be. So, the opportunities that are out there, there was a piece that was done on multiple online news articles about job industry and the gaming world overall, not just esports, and the gaming world overall jumped to 87%, meaning there was a lot of job openings available, but there's not a lot of people going after those type of jobs. We all want to go work for uh, Raymond James, PricewaterhouseCoopers, some big firm companies, Nielsen or whatever case may be, but we don't look at the smaller companies like Decoy Games or some of the smaller publishers in not just in the gaming space, but also who wants to help the community overall do better. And that's a big piece that we overlook because we think those jobs, one, are all done overseas, which the majority of them not. And we want for like Game Drive and for like Marcus for Project MQ, Meta Arena, whatever case may be, we want to show that one, those jobs are actually here, one in the States, but also you have opportunities to, work for those companies. You're not going to be rich, but you'll be able to live comfortable and live in the lifestyle that you want to live. If you want to then go out and be an entrepreneur like myself and Marcus, there are opportunities for you to do so. But again, you need to, one, find the skills. And if you do have skills, one, from learning from gaming, then you can also apply those into your current job, but hopefully put them into your future entrepreneurship that you want to do. And for my company, Game Drive, we want to pretty much expose the vast opportunities that are out there on the back end versus more just on the front end. We want to help the gamers, one, say that they're the best of the best, but we also want to help marketing, sales, management, developers, artists, music, all those pieces that pull into the gaming ecosystem get opportunities.
I would say if you're looking for the real value here, it's digital infrastructure, right? Because live events we saw last year obviously got obliterated across the board in the entertainment sector, including esports. It took a hit for the first time in recent memory for the industry. It took a loss of $150 million, right? But Game Drive, creating the data so you can have the insights to make great decisions, that's going to be valuable. What my platform's doing, which is making esports accessible to brands of all sizes and people from all walks of life, including connecting students to open career opportunities, that is valuable. There are a lot of valuable opportunities, but what you see at front of the house, again, to use Chris's words, like these teams are not profitable because the overhead is so high. For example, if Morgan State University wanted to start a team right now for Call of Duty, you've got to go pay a professional league team. You've got to go pay Activision Blizzard like $25 million. That's just to get the seat in the industry. Then you got to pay salaries. You got to pay the coach. There's so much overhead and infrastructure overhead. I said overhead, but so much that goes into supporting a team. And then the only 40% of the revenue coming in is from sponsors. So you got to go hunt down a sponsor and then hopefully deliver a conversion, right? They pay you money for their brand activation. If you don't deliver on that, they might not pay you again. So it's lopsided. It's heavily lopsided. But again, the infrastructure is the play. And I just want to acknowledge we had a question come in. What can aspiring gamer do to improve bandwidth? And are there affordable options for folks who can't access high-end equipment? Two answers there. Number one, go to either a university or a library, because those typically have the infrastructure that you need for high-end gaming, at least on the internet side. Hopefully, you probably get more high-end computing on a college or university campus than you want in a library, but the internet is typically good there. The other thing is some of these programs and brands like Intel and Asus are starting to put out grants to cover, and Verizon cover internet or subsidize internet and equipment. So you have to kind of do your research there to figure out how can you apply for these grants, or what nonprofit in your community can you encourage to go apply for these grants and help them build their esports program so that you can get the equipment.
Another thing on that is with NVIDIA and Google really open up their data centers and pretty much called cloud computing, giving you opportunity to play some of these high-end games without having to spend thousands of dollars on a PC or computer and still have the capability of competing at that same professional rate. So I'll use Google for Google Stadia. Their cloud computing for gaming is a platform I used recently, and I play some of my games that I can play on my PC. I have pretty much not as much lag depending on my internet speed, but it still gives you the opportunity to compete. Um, and to continue, yes, you can go for those grants, you can go for those opportunities for multiple companies, especially in the technology space, that are willing to offer to universities and whatnot, to subsidize and or pay for your, let's just say, gaming lab. So that way you guys can compete at that same profession level, and also learn the industry, learn where you can go with this journey. And again, it doesn't have to be on the front of the house. Like I say, it could be on the back of the house where you learn how to manage a team, you learn how to develop the game, you learn how to, write news articles about the industry, so that way your article can get picked up not just by your local newspaper, but also by the big news, Bloomberg, New York Times, Washington Post, Washington Times, whatever the case may be, and make a name for yourself.
And I want to really quickly follow up with what Chris said. It was a great suggestion about the cloud gaming, right? If you want to be competitive in gaming anyway, you're going to need high-speed internet. So that's going to run you $75 to $150 a month, right? Depending on what it is, you want a gigabit worth of bandwidth, for up and down your speeds. But if you're going to have to pay for that anyway, if you want to add in Google Stadia, that's only an extra $10 to $15 a month. So you're looking at somewhere in the $100 range a month in order to be competitive using the cloud streaming, versus having to get a high-end computer, which is $3,000 plus upfront, and then you still have to pay for the internet. So you might as well just pay for the internet and then get these cloud subscription gaming set up. So now you have an entry point that's more reasonable.
I wanted to open up questions to the audience as we close out. If anyone has a question, please type it into the Q&A. There was another question said, it sounds expensive, like playing hockey. It is, and I, is that so?
It is. Esports is as expensive as pretty much any sport. Hockey, I'll use hockey and football more just because of the gear wise than anything. So it's one of those, it can be expensive, but you have to look out. If you're looking for a short term, it's not going to work out for you. If you're looking for the long term, then it does benefit you. So that's one thing. I try to tell people when they ask about what computer they should buy, how much should they spend. If you're looking for a short term, here's where your options can be. If you're looking for a really long term, this is where your option is going to be. And most of the times they go for the long options because they see how much it pays out for. And like say for building computers, yes, my rig is 3,000. I built a couple rigs for a few friends ranging from 1,200 to 3,000, and it does everything they need to do. And over the years, my computer is actually 8 years old, to be honest, and it still competes to the games created today. And like I said, long haul. So it all depends on what your end goal. And if you really want to play the short term, here's your options here. If you really want the long term, here's your options here.
I have one question here from Tariq Turner. Are there any other challenges besides the digital divide that Black esports players may face? And I want to get this one in as we close. And thank you, Tariq, for that question.
The culture. And I think that's from a lack of representation. I think not all of it is explicit bias, but there is implicit bias. People like to be around people who look, speak, act like them, who are part of their culture, that people they can relate to. And because of these high price points, if you want to be a high competitive gamer, again, you've got to pay for travel. You might need to pay for a coach, right? An esports coach. If you can't afford these things to compete at a top 1% level, then you don't see representation from the Black and brown community in those top tier events. And when you see players then winning that money, they may turn around and go start their own team or start a game studio. they'll bring in people that they've met and built relationship with through that time period, which may not be Black and brown people because we aren't part of those communities because of those barriers to entry. And that's changing. It's starting to change over the last year, especially what happened, unfortunately with George Floyd. But Chris and I and others are leading those conversations, trying to push that access, make it more available. But the culture is certainly an issue.
There was one other, and I don't want to ignore this. What about the challenges for women who want to go into esports? And before you answer this, I know we're going to be looking at this question, answering this question on each panel that we have. So Marcus, please.
I was on a conference a couple of weeks ago with Family Entertainment Centers, and I mentioned this stat. Someone thought I miscorrectly attributed the statistic. Actually, in the United States, 51% of gamers are women.
Yep.
Someone thought I meant to say like 0.5%. No, the majority of gamers in the United States are women. So that speaks again to the culture issue. If more than half of the gamers are women, why do we only see Queens Collective as the major marquee team? And they just launched in the last 3 to 6 months, right? Why isn't there access? And again, it's because of the culture.
Gentlemen, I have to put a hard stop here. There was another question that came in. If we can answer it really quickly, then, I'd like to get it. Esport has started to adopt male and female tournaments to create a safer space for female athletes. What are your thoughts about creating a safer space tournament for African-American athletes to compete?
Chris, you want that
one? There are spaces that are popping up that are helping out those safer spaces for African Americans, and Danny would probably be the best person for that because his is exposure in South Texas. There's also I can't remember her name, but Access Replay and Allie in Georgia. So those are not just helping predominantly white gamers, but also any gamer overall, male, female, Black, brown, whatever case may be. One, to have a safe space to compete, but also just to engage with the community, especially in their neighboring community wise. So there are plenty of spaces out there. One, you just have to find them, and hopefully with my platform, Marcus' platform, we're able to give you that information so that way you can actually find them a lot more easier in your own area. And if not, if they're coming up, we'll hopefully be able to provide you the information as well.
I agree, and really I want to add on to that very quickly. I think that's great, but I think we also should address the fundamental issue of the culture, because even if we had the success on a Black only whatever segment or whatever game, I think it does a disservice to the skill level of the players if they're not able to showcase on the main stage. We don't want to feel like this is a charity case, and we know that we have this talent. So we have to fix the culture, so not only can we be successful in these safer spaces, but in the larger space as well.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and your candid answers to these questions. And this conversation obviously can go on and on. We're going to take some different aspects into the next panel. If you want to hang around to listen in for that conversation, we're going to take 10 minutes to the top of the hour before we start. Really appreciate you guys. Thank you.
No problem.
You can connect with us on LinkedIn. Glad to make any introductions. Both of us will make our networks available to you all.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And Edward, I actually have a 12 o'clock meeting, so unfortunately I'm gonna have to jump, but thank you all for this amazing opportunity. I look forward to continuing the conversation. Again, open invitation to my network, gaming or esports side. If anyone wants their resume shared on LinkedIn, I've been doing that for nearly a year now with the Play It Forward initiative. I'm an open book, so whatever resources I can provide to the community to grow esports and the ecosystem, glad to help. See you later.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second panel. And we have our panelists are either arriving or are here. And so I just wanted to, I'm John Affleck. I run the Curley Center for Sports Journalism at Penn State University. And I just wanted to take a couple of minutes as we get started here to thank Professor Robinson for doing a ton of the legwork, most of the legwork here to get us all together, and to Morgan State for hosting today's webinar. In between the first panel and our panel, I was on the phone with Professor Robinson. I told him that my knowledge of eSports jumped enormously in the about 100% in that first 45 minutes. So I hope we can have a similar bump in the next 45 minutes. Let me just say, Taryn, I'm getting a message from Professor Gabriella Richard from Penn State. She's waiting to be let in. She's getting a message, so if you can let her in, then we'll have everybody here. We'll just give it a minute.
Is she in the audience?
Let me just see. Oh, yes, she just needs to be promoted from attendee to panelist.
Okay.
Gabriella Richard. There you are.
Hi, sorry about the mix-up. I was in the wrong room, apparently.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So let's get started. Once again, thanks everybody. And so Professor Robinson and I basically had the idea of, like, you just had eSports 101, and now we're going to eSports 301, and that's eSports at the college level. And we have a great panel with us today. I'm just going to do really quick introductions and then open it up. John Cash runs the eSports academic program at Johnson C. Smith in Charlotte, and I've seen his work on video, and he's an expert on the college scene of eSports, both academically and competitively. Taryn Morgan is the coach of the MSU Bears eSports team, and is also an expert in the field and is building the program at Morgan. Gabriella is our advisor for the eSports club at Penn State, and is a professor in the College of Education, and is a researcher whose work has touched on this, and just a great person to have on the panel. So we're really excited. So I come from a place of being a total novice when it comes to eSports knowledge, and I was wondering, all the institutions represented here are in various places, and can speak to a little bit of the difference in the eSports landscape academically and competitively. And so I thought I would just start by going around the room and asking you to talk a little bit about where eSports stands on campus, on your various campuses. I'll just go around the way I'm seeing the screen. So to Professor Richard, and ask her to talk a little bit about what's going on at Penn State.
Sure. So to provide a little bit of a summary, a lot of universities have moved towards a varsity model, and that's increasingly become popular. But one of the most prolific models is a student organization driven model, although that may also be moving towards the direction of being in the minority. these days. And in a student organization model, it's very much like any other student activities model where students are running the organization, but then they have a variety of teams, and those teams might represent the university at a semi-professional level. And there's a vetting process. The varsity models are a little bit more polished, but even within the student organization models, they identify top players or Division I teams, but then other people can join as general members and participate in gaming and learn about the various esports and potentially be on a D1 team or Division I team. And then of course there are different games, and each game has its own collegiate kind of organization or league. Some of those are more formal than others. But here at Penn State, I would say that the interest really started around MOBAs. So a lot of people, multiplayer online battle arenas. So games where it's very much like traditional athletics in a way. You have 5 or 6 players versus 5 or 6 other players. You're playing in a virtual world where you're trying to capture the enemy base or do a variety of complex things around that. League of Legends was a big one, yes. And Riot Games was also quite influential in the formation of collegiate esports, in the sense that they provided one of the first leagues. They still continue to support it. They also have a scholarship organization now, or an association arm. So it provides a space for a lot of the student organization driven models to still have a standing. And then of course there are other organizations around other games. Valorant's become very popular. Call of Duty's increasingly become popular again. So I would say here at Penn State, it's primarily been MOBAs, but it's also moved towards first person shooters and other kinds of games that are organized around still this team-based competition.
About how many, just size of the landscape, about how many students are in the Penn State esports club? And I know there are ancillary clubs dedicated to specific games. So if you took all of those people together, how many people are gaming at an organized competitive level with Penn State attached to their club?
That's a great question. I would say it definitely is over 1,000. At Penn State, it's a bit different than some other universities in that we have several branch campuses. So the clubs are organized at the University Park campus, but their membership can span any campus, and they actually do a lot of their activities online, whether it be on Discord or whether it be playing matches together. So because of that, it's easy to kind of support that model. But physically, who shows up to meetings, you're looking at maybe about 200 people. And then of course you have that broken down by divisions and then who's on a team. So there might only be 5 or 6 people on a team, plus a coach, plus somebody else who might be assisting with organizing. But still within that division, you might have hundreds of people. So I would say in total, it's probably about 1,500 if you include all of we have the main esports club, which I advise, and we have the League of Legends club now because they got so big that they branched off. So yes.
So I just want to, so for anybody who isn't from Penn State or doesn't know the numbers, so it's a school that at the University Park campus has roughly 40,000 students, and our yes, there's a League of Legends club. And the number of varsity athletes is about 800. So what Professor Richard just said is that the number of gamers playing under a Penn State banner essentially doubles the number of people who are playing the traditional varsity sports. So let's move on to Professor Cash. I'm fascinated by what you're doing at Johnson C. Smith, and I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about that and your experience of how it's going with an actual esports academic program.
Okay, sure. First of all, thank you guys for having me, Mr. Robinson, Morgan State University. Being a DMV native, I'm very familiar with Morgan State and all my beloved HBCUs in Maryland. and so very happy that the Maryland legislature has recognized empowering HBCUs there with the money that's due because of inequality toward HBCUs to the 4 institutions there. Also, I didn't hear Mr. Robinson or Mr. Green recognize. Looks like they might be on hold somewhere else, but thank you for both of them. I know Mr. Green, he's from the Maryland area also. Again, my name is John Cash, live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I've been an adjunct professor. So I'm an adjunct professor at Johnson C. Smith. I also have my own business and I work corporate. But one way I give back to HBCUs, it has been by teaching. And I think I had to tell this story so it makes it's more palatable. I'm a native of Washington, D.C., proud Howard University graduate, undergrad. And when I moved here to Charlotte from Atlanta, I knew that they were looking for support with their program. So I teach business, I teach sports entertainment. Approximately 2.5 years ago, I was working on a project in Atlanta and we started talking more about eSports. Now, again, I grew up with Madden, I grew up in arcades, I grew up in Call of Duty, being a military veteran also. So I remember when that was being built out. But what I found out during my research, the first piece of research I found out at the time, there were over 250 PWIs with some type of esports curriculum, program, club team, and or lab. As late as October 2019, there was still 0 HBCUs. I knew I had to flip that script, and I worked with Dr. Bernadette Lawson Williams, a tenured professor within the sport entertainment program, did all the research in 2019 leading up to developing curriculum, minor program, and the track of what would become our club team, as well as building out an esports lab. January 2020, we launched the first HBCU esports program in the country. And now I'm glad to say that we have built out the curriculum, built out the club. We have a club team with approximately 15 individuals right now on the team, and we put together a lab. And oh, by the way, this was done with no budget. So we were able to reallocate $30,000 from a Dell grant from the computer science program to help build out our eLab. I've been getting great support from PWIs through my Twitch relationship. I have a Twitch student relationship as well as a Microsoft relationship. So I've been introduced to UCI, Miami of Ohio, University of Texas, actually where I got my MBA from. So I have a great affection for UT Austin and what they're doing with their programs, and look forward to developing more relationships, of course, with Ms. Richard and what she's doing at Penn State. So that's how we built it. I've taught about 4 or 5 courses. We brought on another adjunct professor this past spring semester, so very excited about that. And the secret to our success is really just partnerships and advocacy. Yeah, I'm an adjunct professor, but I'm a businessman. So I go out and do deals. We've been very fortunate that we have a relationship with now Microsoft, Twitch, Riot Games, Epic Games, EA, 2K, and Madden. We've developed those relationships by just going out and sharing our opportunities. We've also secured 12 internships so far between Riot, Epic, and Twitch. So very excited about that. And we look forward to continuing growing. It's going to be based upon what the president of the institution wants to do and what success looks like for him as we come through the pandemic. I don't have a say in that game. I mean, I have an opinion, but it's still going to be based on the institution. And I say that because every institution is different how they approach esports education initiatives versus league play or where that's going to be. We presently do not have a certified coach, which you need to have a team. So we have a club team, but our club team, and this is the beauty of esports, we're beating D1 competition on the regular. We've beaten Virginia Tech, University of North Carolina, Wilmington. I can go on and on. We play across platforms, Call of Duty, NBA 2K, Rocket League. Of course, we're doing more with Riot because of Riot support, as well as Fortnite with Epic. So we will continue that. And then I will tell you the secret sauce of everything. Once I was coming on board with launching this program, at the same time, 2 other HBCU graduates from Oakwood University, Huntsville, Alabama, and North Carolina Central, Durham, North Carolina, they approached me in regards to what I was doing in the education front. We did the one to twin superpower thing. I just dated myself there. And
I got it.
and we developed Community. Community is the first HBCU education and esports league designed to amplify lower socioeconomic K through 12 and HBCU institutions. Our league now has over approximately 30 schools engaged. 18 are active play, including Johnson C. Smith and my alma mater, Howard, which, although we're not official, we're still playing. And in addition, we have developed curriculum, an esports curriculum platform for K through 12. We're beta testing in Atlanta right now. By the way, I didn't say that Community was founded last February, right before the pandemic hit. And the ink is just drying on our 501c3 from starting last February. But during that time, we've secured relationships with Twitch and Twitch Student, Microsoft. We are in the midst of developing and finalizing our relationship with the United Negro College Fund. That is very important because UNCF represents approximately 30% of all HBCUs, and there are approximately 102 HBCUs, depending on what study you look at right now. So that's a little bit about what we're doing at Johnson C. Smith University, a little bit about our esports program, where we do have a minor right now, a highlight of Community. And one of the beautiful things is our Community League play started last fall. We will never ask a student, we will never ask an institution to fund the program. Our funding comes from our sponsorship. Our first sponsor that we're really excited about is Verizon. And we've been averaging approximately 1.3 million unique views per week in our league. And we have more great things coming. I'm going to end with this one because this is really exciting. One of the things I did over the past several months is reach out to the White House HBCU initiative. The White House HBCU initiative was developed at the end of the Bush administration, beginning of the Obama administration, to provide HBCUs a platform with the Department of Education to amplify opportunities for greater education. I'm excited to say that we're going to have a preliminary program with the White House HBCU initiative. When I say we, Community and HBCU esports, on June the 4th. And then we're going to have a greater presence. We're going to be one of the subject topics during the annual conference in September. Again, meeting again with the Department of Education and the HBCU representatives that will be there. So I'll end on that note. And I'm proud of my jersey. That's the other thing I didn't share.
That's
we
sweet.
did a program, and I got to give a shout out because they gave this to us in kind with Point 3. Point 3 is a brand new esports gaming apparel company headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. And another claim to fame, right after we did our deal with them, they came out with an announcement that they became the jersey and uniform for Evil Geniuses. And I didn't mention that we leverage a lot of the professional teams to help with our education, K through 12, and with Johnson C. Smith. So we have, through Community, relationships with Evil Geniuses, Immortals, FaZe Clan, including Atlanta FaZe Clan, and Offset is one of our associates, and then also 100 Thieves. So we're really proud of the extent to our growth in less than a year, and look forward to continued partnership and opportunities.
Thank you, Mr. Cash. The just one really quick follow-up is that I saw you in a local news piece in Charlotte in class say that you know, the model traditionally with traditional sports has been kind of like, okay, we're going to build you know, whatever sport out. And then after a while, there comes this moment. This gets back to our last panel of like, oh, there's a minority market. Oh, there's women in the market. And it feels to me like you're doing a lot to disrupt that model and to push forward the students at John C. Smith right now and get people of color and women involved.
Yeah, one thing I didn't mention, but I mean, it's all about equality, and we can talk as much as we want about social impact. And again, blessings go out to everyone, first of all. But one critical issue I didn't share, and is this factoid. Again, I'm a researcher and I'm a businessman, so I have to have fact-based analysis. Else all you have is a water sandwich. 83% of African Americans 18 to 24 are gaming on a weekly basis versus 72% for Anglo. And this is by the International Esports Association facts of 2019, but only 2% of African Americans are within the esports gaming industry of any significance. So again, we're trying to do what I call education, empowerment, and employment through esports and gaming. And that's in my vision, in my mind, of where we are when I'm talking about what the opportunity is. So again, we're looking at continued partnerships, relationships, and uplifting of everyone. Regarding the sex, background, women, I'm so excited about the women in our league that are playing. That just gives me as much joy because we know about the sexism and the relationships that we build with Erin Ansley Simone, who is a leading Hispanic, Latina, Black gaming executive, as well as others, including Miss Angela Roseborough at Riot Games. Johanna Ferris has been an opportunity for us to talk to. So we respect the diversity in it, and we just want equality for all.
Fantastic. Taryn, I'm really sorry to have kept you holding so long. Tell us a little bit about where things stand at Morgan and what you're up to there.
All right, so at Morgan, we're really at the infancy stages of things. We actually got invited to Community's HBCU Battlegrounds event in October, and we actually won that tournament too. So that was kind of like our introduction to the world when it came to Morgan within the HBCU eSports League. So for us, we're currently focusing on building the club. My main thing is really developing that community, getting our students, especially those who are more prone to being more within their shell, within their rooms and whatnot, and using gaming as a way to really connect with them, to really tap into that untapped audience. Because with traditional programming, they often don't come out the rooms, and also with the pandemic also, they're not really getting that social interaction. So I come from a student affairs background. I was a resident director. So I'm more so about the holistic development of our students. So we have the club aspect, but also I want to even touch on the other things. So touching on with career, we're building up our curriculum currently. We actually are putting together a presentation to present to the president's cabinet so that we can officially move forward with stuff, but we kind of like unofficially moving. We're at like a soft launch phase right now, and we're moving steadily along with the MEAC conference. So I actually sit on the MEAC conference as the chairman for the marketing and the sponsorship committee. So we're trying to move all of our MEAC institutions hand in hand. So with us, we've been doing a lot of community day events. So actually, shameless plug, we're doing a community day event for Call of Duty Cold War next week. All institutions are available to join us. It's all about having our students connect to others at their peer institutions and to start to build that network, because these are our leaders within esports. We can do as much research as we like, but our students know more with the technology. So really just allowing for our students to have that ownership piece and allow for them to feel that they're a part of the process of building this beast currently. So as of right now, we do have 4 players for our NBA 2K tournament that's coming up with the MEAC. So that's our only official team right now, but right now we're really just building up that club so that it can be that feeder system that can go into our varsity league when we built it up. So, but there's a lot of excitement here with esports, and definitely we're trying to bridge the gap, because currently we have some students on campus, but we have students off campus too. So we're gonna make sure that everyone can still get the Morgan culture, the Morgan camaraderie, and to really just still connect with the campus, even though they're farther away. So we're using this as a way to really tap into our students to make sure that they feel connected. So there's just a lot of excitement with esports here at Morgan, and we're definitely ready to go and ready to compete. So, you know, just really just organizing everything to move forward. With the MEAC, we're actually moving forward with competitive play in the fall. So right now it's really just getting our students used to the systems, the Discord servers, getting staff on board, educating the higher up. So it's really just an introduction to esports, and, you know, slow and steady wins the race, and you build a strong foundation like that instead of rushing. So, you know, we're not in a rush, but I definitely think that we're on the right track to do some big things and to have a program that will ensure that our students are ready to successfully enter the esports field or any other STEM field too, because there's a lot of implications that esports has that can allow for them to move on to other areas too. So I'm definitely excited to help our students excel.
That makes perfect sense. We're getting close to the bottom of the hour, and I just want to say to any of the students who are online, if you want to jump in the chat or jump in the Q&A and ask a question, you're more than welcome to do so. I've got to ask a couple of dumb questions. But if you're sitting out there wondering exactly how college esports works, this may be your moment to listen in. Okay, so in my sports writing class, and I also have a sports media and society class where we have students who are attending this panel. We talked a little bit this week about the NCAA, and obviously, which is taking a beating right now on the inequality between what labor the players are getting and the rest of the sports industry. So the NCAA, I believe last year, tabled indefinitely any decision on whether to have sort of NCAA championships at the esports level. And I'm wondering if anybody can tell me a little bit more about the feelings within the gamer community about whether that's even a good idea. I understand we've got, you know, a situation here where there are different types of prizes. So if anybody wants to help me walk through that, I would appreciate it. I'll let anybody jump in.
Well, I can talk a little bit about the student sentiment. I think because esports really started as a student-driven model, even before the NCAA was formally getting involved, there was a lot of hesitancy, often noted amongst student organizations, because Division I teams don't necessarily have to be through a varsity-driven or administrative-driven model at the university level. As long as teams can qualify, and I think that's what's really great that both John and Taryn brought up, it allows for more of this organic flow of people who could be involved and compete at that level and compete for prizes. And sometimes it's not these top varsity teams that make it to the finals. So from a D1 model, a lot of student organizations and even independent groups who are representing a university, you know, with permission by the university, can win pretty big in prize pools and other things. So there has been some pushback from that model for a while. There's also other organizations that have cropped up in the meantime, including NACE, which is the National Association of Collegiate Esports. And there was some debate a couple of years ago about whether universities would be moving towards more of this collegiate athletics model, or they would be part of a student organization model.
So right now, am I correct if I'm saying that the move to the varsity model, there's a move to a varsity model, but it is not necessarily, not necessarily. It's just not part of an NCAA related sport at this point.
I think it depends on the university.
Okay. John, did you have something you wanted to say about this?
No, I feel Ms. Richard hit everything on the head. I totally agree. If you ask the students, the NCAA doesn't really have a great image around with students right now. And I think it'll be adversely impacted if the NCAA tries to engage in it. The other thing that students are talking about are the multimedia rights groups and their, for lack of better words, intrusion in the space, whether it's Learfield IMG, JMI, Van Wagner, and I've worked for some of them, so I know those infrastructures. But what they're putting out there, which will be the carrot, is prize money and possible scholarships. So when students see that, it'll be interesting. So in my mind, educators like Ms. Richards can share more with me. I'm doing my own research. I think the jury is still going to be out because, as we all know, this area is so new and so fast moving.
Two observations. One is that I in my research for this panel, I found that $15 million in eSports scholarships were awarded in 2019 across the country, which is significant. And that just sorry, I just lost the other point, but it'll come back to me. I'm wondering what goes into a university's thinking when they're thinking about the kind of program we've got, because we sort of have three models here into what fits. We've got Johnson C. Smith going with a full degree program. Morgan is building its team and building a holistic model. Penn State has a club model. Generally speaking, we don't have to get into the weeds on any particular university's choice, but what are they sort of weighing? What are the factors that they're weighing when they decide how heavily to go into the esports space? I guess is where I'm trying to go with this. Does anybody have
Hey, John, before we get into that question, I want to be respectful to the two questions from the guests in the chat, Miss Alexander and Mr. Destin, and specifically for Mr. Destin because he addressed the question toward me. Mr. Destin, please feel free to follow up with me. I'll put my information in the chat, John, if that's permissible.
Sure.
Okay. And since I was running my mouth, I'll just finish up. I think it's an individual thing regarding how colleges and universities look at an esports strategy. And that's going to be dependent on the leadership and board of directors. That's where it lives. I brought the business proposal and the value proposition along with Dr. Bernadette Lawson Williams, who again is on the line and definitely an innovator in this area. She punched it through because we both saw the opportunity. And it is where it is right now. What will happen in the future? Again, it's going to be dependent on presidents and boards. We see what happened at Becker College. Becker College was one of the preeminent leaders in esports gaming. The college went away, but they're still looking at esports gaming initiatives there. So I think it's definitely on a case-by-case basis, and it has to be a part of the overarching college or institution strategy, from my opinion.
For Morgan, I know that I'm really taking a data-driven approach. Oftentimes we see what's going on around the other institutions within this nation with esports, but it's more so show and prove. So for me, I'm looking at how many students are signing up with this registration of the webinar, people showing interest. And then also I'm even doing a survey that's going to be administered to the campus of both staff and students, because I want to make sure that we're having that additional interaction between staff, especially within a non-formal setting, because that's when a lot of the genuine connections are made, and students who may be going through something, especially during the pandemic, there's been a lot of mental health situations going on. So if they feel more comfortable with staff, then they're going to be able to really connect with them. So for us, I want to get the surveys out there, collect all this data, and then look at what everyone's doing and present a nice bow tie package to them and then say, here we go. This is the approach that we could take, really, definitely. But it seems like we're very, that the higher ups are interested in approaching and creating a academic program for this too. So it's a lot of potential, really. But for me, I want to make sure that we have the data, and that's also going to help us with bringing in funding if we do have sponsors come on board or any other additional opportunities. So data is king, in my opinion.
Seems reasonable.
And terms of the models, what we saw initially towards the varsity driven models were really driven at the smaller private universities that might have been trying to attract different students and take advantage of burgeoning areas in athletics where they may not have had a lot of representation. However, now it's really become so prolific that we're starting to see major universities signing on. But I think the hesitancy, especially amongst universities that had more of a nationally recognized athletic, organizing body, I think it became difficult to navigate that space between where does the NCAA fit in and where do these other models fit in. So I think that's, at least from what I've seen across the board, with the exception of UC Irvine, which has really kind of led the field amongst some of the larger public universities, there has been some hesitancy on the part of some universities to sign on to that model until they see some precedent set there.
Let me just ask, how much of an issue is it from a college perspective? We talked in the previous panel about the changes in the games themselves. So from edition to edition, you can have a significant change in how the game works, which you just don't have in football and baseball. And how much does that play in? How much of an issue is that? Are the people who are playing it at the collegiate level so good that they just roll with it and it's fine, or does that create complexities in terms of arguing over the rules and who plays and all that sort of thing? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, for us and with the MEAC particularly, new games come out all the time. So for instance, last year, actually this current semester, we were looking at doing a Call of Duty tournament. So there was Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and then Cold War came out. So it's one of those things of, do students have the financial resources to have these platforms? So for us, it's sometimes there's not cross-play available for some of these games. So it's really a struggle. So when it comes to the MEAC's approach, we're just going to see like what students have so far. It seems like it's a lot of Xbox. So it's more so for us, it's been kind of a struggle because, we're building the programs, but then you have students that have games that aren't cross-compatible. So for us, it's really just a trial and error type thing, trying to figure out our approach. But what about the other institutions?
Well, I can speak a little bit to the games. More generally, I haven't really seen that come up so much within the collegiate space, but generally in esports, there is a bit of a learning curve. And in studying the ways that people learn around esports in particular, really getting into the meta game is a big part of what people who are really expert in these games are able to do. So there's this idea of the proficiency congruency dilemma, which is what is your individual expertise versus the team's expertise. And we tend to find that players that make it to that top less than 1% level, which is often what D1 teams consist of, these are players that have been very good at navigating both their individual expertise along with team expertise. And that's something that they kind of brought with them before they got to the collegiate level. So I think part of broadening the pipeline and increasing access, particularly for those historically marginalized in esports and other similar computing and information sciences fields, which are women and Black and Latinx people broadly, it's about increasing that pipeline throughout. So one of the initiatives, and I'm really, really impressed with what, John, you all are doing there, because it's really important to think about this as part of a larger ecosystem of STEM learning. Because what all of the research shows is that what players are bringing into the esports space is transferable and immediately applicable, not only to these emerging fields in tech, but also some of the more historic fields. So all kinds of computing and information sciences and engineering skills. So really tapping into that interest-driven learning that happens in esports, but making those connections to help solidify that and make content more accessible, make fields more accessible to students is important, going all the way back to K through 12. So I think these kinds of initiatives are important. I don't want to go off too much on a tangent, but I think it's really important to think about things like what Taryn, you just brought up around what kinds of systems and technologies different learners and different groups have access to.
Access is a huge issue.
Because that has been one of the biggest dividing lines in esports, in competitive gaming, in the inclusion of minoritized players, and the types of games that are supported at the top level in esports. So NBA 2K, it took a really long time to get NBA 2K to be recognized as an esport. And part of that had to do with the fact that most people were playing NBA 2K on consoles, and most of the players were players of color. So we've often seen this value placed on PC-driven esports, but we don't think about the ramifications of what it means to play as someone who has the top level PC platforms, which is often historically people who have more means and opportunity. And that happens along racial lines too. So there have been a lot of these less visible ways that players of color have been excluded within certain kinds of esports and professional practices in computing and information technologies. And one of those is what games are supported at that top level in esports.
Interesting. We're getting down to time, folks. So I do want to, before we close, we've got a student question, which I think is actually really interesting. But let's just run around. If you have something to say, we'll just do it real quick. With college athletes fighting to be able to make revenue off their own brand, we're talking about name, image, likeness here. Where does that stand in the esports ecosystem for esports athletes? I'm guessing at the college level, this is okay in esports world.
Yeah. I believe they've released something about allowing students to make money off their likeness. I'm not quite sure, a couple months ago, but in terms of esports athletes, I think it's prime time. I come from a video background, so they are able to create content like it's nothing. You have TikTok, you have Instagram Reels, you have Twitch. So necessarily you can take that gameplay and you can repurpose it for many different platforms. And with that, you can get sponsors that will actually pay you for making content or creating content, product placement. Students who are funny commentators, you can be a caster. So there's a lot of different opportunities, a lot of unique pathways for students to enter this field. It's just a matter of being innovative and having that confidence to go out there and get it, definitely. But it's prime time for content creators, especially esports athletes.
Let me just ask one last question, and then we'll wrap it up. Just sort of, do you have a sort of final thought message to somebody who's out there watching this, thinking, I'd like to get involved in the esports space, and you know, I'm not exactly sure how to take the first step. Do you have any recommendations for the students out there, where they should look, where they should go, what they should do? I'm talking more than just actually picking up and playing a game, getting involved in their community.
Well, for all students, I mean, for all my classes and everything that I advocate for empowerment. And one of the ways to do that is building your own. And so before I even start a class, I have conversations on entrepreneurship and building your own business. You can start an LLC in a half an hour. And so what if you go out of business? Close it down on Friday and start another LLC on Monday. The other thing I talk to my students about is finances and investment and setting yourself up for financial independence so you can do whatever you want to do. That's how I start all my conversations out, because that's how I wish I would have started out, being an inner city kid in Washington, D.C. And then the next thing is, and I think the students do this because this thing, they grew up with this. This is an appendage. And so what you hear them talking about is passion professions and compassionate capitalism. I think you see a trend, not a fad, where students are saying, how can I empower myself, live my goals, as well as help my community? Esport gaming is just one component of that. I call it the convergence of sports, entertainment, and society to help rectify opportunities that government and/or industries are not addressing. And you see that in this industry in a very transparent way. And the most beautiful thing I love about the industry and the students in it now, and the students should take away, is that they are self-policing. They can see through all the sponsorship glam and glitter. They can see through all the manipulation. We like to call them culture vultures. And so they are self-monitoring themselves. And so for the students who just want gameplay, there are many institutions out there, you know, that's one opportunity. For those interested in education, there are many institutions just like on this call. And it's yes, STEM and STEAM. And I started off by saying lower socioeconomic K through 12 and HBCUs. But in addition to STEM and STEAM, there are traditional areas too. The industry still needs marketers, business development, media communications people, other areas. So I would ask them to have conversations with Mr. Morgan here, with Miss Richard, with others in their area, so they can get an understanding of what's best for them.
I would say that you perfectly captured that, John, and I agree. There's so much going on within the esports space and the variety of skills that are out there. I mean, especially now with streaming, there's all kinds of multimodal experiences. There's a variety of new and emerging skills. There's also sports broadcasting, as you're well aware of. So there's emerging skills, there's more of these traditional skills, and some of that is also encouraging students to make those connections across the board. That's why it's really important to have curricula to help broaden those possibilities, and also to think about how the variety of ways what they're learning can be applied. But in terms of students getting involved, I would say just start finding out what's happening on your campuses. Different campuses have different models, but starting with the student club driven model might be a nice place to go. Even on campuses that have varsity teams, I'm sure they have student organizations, and a lot of those students are plugged in and are involved and are getting involved in alternative ways on their campuses. And other ways to get involved would be community outreach and broadening the ecosystem, as John mentioned.
Taryn, you want the last word?
Oh, yes, I'll do that. Social media definitely is a very good tool to get started. You're able to connect with other institutions easily if you just start off with esports, and then if you're in a certain state, you can find different people within there. And really just asking around to your friends, other clubs, organizations, you know, if there's some people who game, come together to see if you're able to create a tournament or something like that, because it's easy to do. And then if you're seeing you're having success, then to bring that to administration. The main thing, if you want to create something new, is to have that partnership with administration to make sure that it is able to be created. Also, one thing I didn't mention earlier about athletes becoming, finding funding within esports. I'm interested to see how esports is going to enter the NFT worlds, because right now NFTs have come around within the past couple of months. And I think that there's this prime ground right there too for esports to enter into. So definitely be on the lookout for NFTs within esports.
Great. And with that, I think we need to close so we can be respectful of the next panel. Really appreciate it. Great insights. Appreciate your time so much. And thanks very much, folks. I'm just going to go mute and we'll go from there. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the panel. It was an excellent, thank you, John. Thanks, Mr. Cash, everyone on the panel. It's wonderful. We're going to take the next 10 minutes to break in between the next panel, and we'll be back. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We are headed into session 3, eSports and sports journalism, the 400 level. I'd like to introduce my guest for this panel. I have with us today Mr. Trent Murray, who covers eSport for the eSport Observer. They strive to be the most reliable source for esports business information. He has covered this industry for the past 5 years, and I think he's based in Germany. Really appreciate you joining us for the panel. Mr. Brian Bencomo, he covers esports for Nerd Street Gamers, which is an online site that provides original content for gamers. He's also worked as an esports journalist for ESPN and Fox Sports. I want to talk this hour about the connection between esports and sports journalism and how those worlds have collided as esports has grown into such a I guess ever expanding industry, and the one where we constantly use the word billion dollar. I'm going to come back to that again, $1 billion industry. If you look back in, as I was researching, if you go back from 2000 and between 2000 and 2021, the reports kept the news articles kept predicting by 2021 a $1 billion industry. Trent, are we there? Is the sport there, and what does that mean?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me today. I'm excited to have this conversation. We're definitely getting there. There's a lot of different reports and different metrics that are being used to evaluate the esports space, but I think the one thing we can definitely say is that there is more than ever before the level of engagement, of viewership, of interest from non-endemic brands and from investors is at an all-time high. So the industry is certainly propelling itself forward like we've never seen before.
Brian, I pose the same to you. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really happy to be here. I think, yeah, as an industry, like, we're definitely getting there. I know that there's different reports out there, different projections. I think a couple of years ago, we saw a lot of investment in the Overwatch League, millions of dollars being used to sort of buy franchise spots. Traditional sports owners were kind of trying to get into the game. And then last year, like during the pandemic, we saw an increased focus on esports and gaming. I saw it at the company that I used to work at ESPN. There were no live sports going on. And so one of the things that they did was that they started putting on esports on TV. So I think that the pandemic has certainly accelerated whatever trends were already there as far as like the growth of the industry.
So esports have been covered by journalists in a variety of ways over the past 20 years, from novelty to now traditional sporting event. What is your approach as a journalist in covering this industry? Are you more business focused, or are you actually covering the events? That's to you, Brian, and then I'll move over to Trent.
Sure. So I think it depends on, as far as like covering esports, I think it depends on what site you go to. Every site is going to have sort of a different focus. For me, both at ESPN and at Nerd Street Gamers, the focus has mainly been on the competition, on what's going on, with the different games and tournaments that are going on. And I mean, there's a ton of them. Like, when you're talking about esports, you're talking about like, you know, dozens of games. You know, you're talking about League of Legends, Call of Duty, Overwatch, you know, Fortnite, PUBG. The list goes on and on. So I think for me specifically, like the focus has always been on the competition and the different players and teams that are involved. Like I think that's something that you know, fans of esports are generally interested in. I know that there are other publications that focus more on the business side. And I think we have done a little bit of the business reporting, you know, back at ESPN. We had a really great news reporter, Jacob Wolf. He would always break a lot of stories about different transactions or different like, you know, moves that were going on in the industry. So I think that there are still a lot of opportunities out there for different coverage areas. Like we just did an audit at Nerd Street Gamers to kind of assess the landscape of esports media to kind of give us a sense of like, okay, where are there opportunities to sort of do coverage that other sites aren't doing? And I think we found some pretty interesting things there as far as like areas where we might want to sort of wade into.
Trent, I'm going to pose that question to you.
Yeah, for me, so the Esports Observer is a business outlet. Our entire focus in coverage is the business side of esports, sponsorships, investments, where the money is flowing in esports and where the opportunity for those with a business interest that want to understand esports are coming from. And we're also a partner with the Sports Business Journal. So we write for their newsletters and their print magazine and those sorts of things, focusing on the intersection between sports and esports and digital media and all of these intersecting and interlocking things. And one of the things that we also do a lot that I'm sure Brian has also experienced is with esports, a lot of what you're doing anytime you're touching a segment that maybe isn't deeply ingrained in esports is the role of a journalist is almost also the role of an educator, because so many people are unfamiliar with this space, especially on the business side, but have an interest in understanding, okay, my kids won't stop talking about Fortnite and there's this kid that made $3 million playing this Fortnite game. Nissan and Honda and Chipotle are all sponsoring esports tournaments. What am I missing? Yeah. So there's an aspect of that coverage that is also educating people about this space and about what's happening here, why people are interested in watching someone play video games for money, those sorts of things.
So help me understand the skill sets from your perspective that a young journalist, a journalists who may want to get into this aspect of sports reporting, what do they need to know, and where can they sharpen their tools, their toolkit to become better and find their way into the esports landscape?
I think one of the things that really can serve a journalist in the esports space is a broad knowledge of the landscape. A lot of people, esports is a very passion-fueled industry. So most people that get into esports have a passion for gaming, want gaming to be a part of their career. And most people that get into writing about games have one game that they really love. And so if you're a big fan of League of Legends, you start writing about League of Legends, you start reporting on League of Legends. And if you're going to be, an analyst or a commentator, I think that can serve you. But for the most part, especially on the business side, it's really important to have a broad understanding of all of the major games, all of the different titles and publishers that are involved, and to go beyond that to digital media as a whole, because the intersection between esports and the gaming industry as a whole and live streaming, all of these things are so interwoven with one another that it's really difficult to be an effective journalist in this space without having an understanding of all of those different aspects that can affect what's going on in esports.
Do you have to have a so I got into sports journalism and I didn't understand golf, so I got a golf for dummies book immediately. I understood baseball, but when I really got covering the opportunity to cover baseball, I realized how much I did not know. And part of a journalist is catching up. How do journalists entering this field kind of catch up, and what are some of the things that they have to learn when you start to cover esports versus traditional sports?
I can take this one. So coming from my point of view, like I'm relatively new to esports. So I come from the traditional sports world. I didn't start covering esports until 2019, so 2 years ago. I first started learning about it in 2018. So I think it can be daunting if you're not like super familiar with the space.
Yeah.
But I think what it is it's basically watching a lot of esports. It's watching and reading about them. So, in 2018, I started watching League of Legends and Overwatch. Overwatch was really the game that sort of first brought me in because I started to see like these huge investments being made in the league. And then I was playing Overwatch too. So it was the game that I was most familiar with.
Okay.
So that was kind of the hook that brought me in. And then from there, it's just a matter of, just watching all the different games and becoming familiar with the teams and the players. And, I still wouldn't say that, I would say that I'm still learning. And I think that is kind of something that, is true for every journalist. Like you're still constantly learning. You're learning from your writers and you're learning from the stuff that you see and the stuff that you read. So I think that it's just a process. I think that Trent was right in saying that, like, there might be one game that you're super interested in and that you want to, sort of learn more about and write about. And that's kind of the entryway. And ultimately you want to become competent enough to understand the landscape. And so you become familiar with the different games and the different orgs that are involved.
Every conference or panel that I either attend or conferences that I go to or listen to, student journalists always ask this question: how do you get a job doing how do you get a job covering esports? Is it the same as traditional sports journalism, which is already a hard entrance point? How do you do that?
The thing I always tell people is to start right now. The internet has made it so that you do not have to wait for somebody else's permission to start writing about video games. You can do it tomorrow with your own blog, with your own Twitter. There's a great kid that I met recently out of Morocco, where there's basically no esports coverage. And so he just started doing a twit longer every Monday, rounding up League of Legends news from the Middle East and North Africa. And has leveraged that into, connections and just started his own career in esports just by, typing some words on Twitter on a consistent basis. So there's no barrier to starting in esports or really in any digital field. I feel now you then leveraging that into a full-time position is going to require the same things it requires in every other industry: networking, experience, a portfolio that proves that you have the talent and ability to work, accepting freelance gigs that you maybe are not super excited about, but that prove that you can then, work to a deadline and those sorts of things. But the biggest answer is, if you're not already writing every day about esports, you're behind every other person that's applying for the jobs that you want.
Yeah, I would say that it's definitely a combination of like, having that experience writing about esports and then also, networking and getting to know, people who could, assist you with getting, positions down the line. I think that I was pretty fortunate in working at a big company like ESPN. So, I made the transition from working on the copy desk there to working on the esports vertical. And unfortunately, I got laid off by ESPN last year. And then what I found was that as I was, searching for new job opportunities, the vast majority of the opportunities that presented themselves were in esports. So I would say that it's definitely, there are more opportunities than there are in traditional sports. And I think, traditional sports is definitely very saturated in terms of, coverage, whereas esports, it's still pretty open. There's obviously tons of sites and tons of people doing coverage, but I think that there are more opportunities there and more opportunities that continue to pop up. So I would say that, for anybody who's interested in covering esports, is to just write and build your portfolio.
Thank you. I wonder what's the next conversation that journalists are having in esports? What's current for today? I saw an article in the New York Times in preparation for this conversation about the arenas that are being built around the country for the purposes of participants watching esports. Is that where you see the conversation moving in terms of what's next to be written about? I saw an arena in Philadelphia that was built by Comcast. That seems to be this huge theater where they're expected to house 3,000 participants for a e-gaming event. Where are you concentrating your efforts these days in terms of reporting?
Brian, that's right in your backyard with Nerd Street, so I'll let you take that to start.
Sure. So I don't know if there's any one thing that I'm focused on or that the industry is focused on, but I'll speak a little bit about some of these arenas that are being built. I think that globally you see that there are a lot of huge arenas where people go to watch esports. When you think of South Korea or China or even Europe, and I think in the U.S., typically competitions have been held in smaller studios like the LCS studio in Santa Monica. But I think, in recent years, we are starting to see more investment in bigger arenas being built specifically for esports. So the one in Philadelphia is a good example. I think that arena is meant to house the Philadelphia Fusion from the Overwatch League. I know that Overactive Media, which is based in Toronto, also recently announced plans for a big arena. And that one was, again, meant for an Overwatch team and a Call of Duty team. So I know that there are, and with Nerd Street specifically, where primarily it kind of started off as an infrastructure company. So Nerd Street has a bunch of these sites around the country, which we call local hosts. And basically they're facilities where people can come in and game on PCs. So Nerd Street is continuing to build more and more facilities. They just opened their first location in California a couple weeks ago, and I know that they have another couple facilities planned for California and elsewhere throughout the country. So I think that the infrastructure is certainly picking up, and I think with the pandemic, it sort of slowed things down. But I think once things start to return to normal, we're going to see and we're going to hear about more facilities being built.
Yeah, the live event space is really going to be interesting because it's such a different conversation now from what it was when what we expected it to be in 2020, but before the pandemic. And I think what a lot of people outside of esports maybe don't fully understand is that while a lot of these games can be played online, there's nothing like an arena full of people cheering on a Call of Duty experience. If you haven't been to a live esports experience, it is unlike anything you've ever seen before, and it is a truly special experience. So there's going to be such a demand for live events going forward after the pandemic. The same way that people have been itching to get back to basketball arenas, people in esports are hungry for live esports tournaments to come back. So that is, I think, a really important part of the conversation that's going to be something that both from the business side and from the, just competition coverage side, the shift back to live events and how that affects the industry as a whole is going to be really important. I think the other thing that I've been paying a lot of attention to and that we've been doing a lot of writing on recently is the rise of women in gaming, because obviously we all know that gaming was for a long time stereotyped as a boys' activity, and that has done a lot of harm to the accessibility of women in esports, because there are a lot of harmful stereotypes around, well, women just aren't as good at games, and that's why they don't play, and that's why there aren't as many women at the top level, which has been proven untrue enough times that it's no longer a discussion that needs to be had, but it has led to fewer women being represented at the highest level on professional teams and things like that. And there's a lot of initiatives being taken upon by companies like Riot Games and organizations like Cloud9 to provide more opportunities for women to receive the resources and support that male competitors have received for so long, so that we can move esports to a place where eventually you'll see fully co-ed teams competing at the highest level, which is something that I think is really exciting and is something that at the Esports Observer we've been really paying attention to.
I want to follow up with you, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Brian. Go ahead.
I was just going to jump off of what he was saying about women in esports. I think
Absolutely.
that one of the newest games that, just came out last year, Valorant,
Yep.
It's run by Riot Games, and we've seen a lot more women competing in Valorant, I think, than other games. And Riot has done a good job of sort of supporting that scene. And Nerd Street has, been a part of that as well. Like we just helped Riot run this all women Valorant tournament a couple weeks ago that was very successful. And Cloud9 White is so Cloud9 is a major esports org, and so they have both an all male team and an all women team. And so Cloud9 White, the all women team, has actually been quite successful, and they've actually beaten some men's teams. So they're sort of proving that women can be just as good as men. And we've also seen some mixed rosters. So Evil Geniuses has a roster that has both men and women on the team. So Valorant is definitely the game to watch in terms of, if you want to see more women participating.
I wanted to not leave that point, but I wanted to go back to the arenas and ask Trent, from a global perspective, can you describe what it's like to cover esports in other countries, and to go back to what you described as nothing like what you can imagine watching esports in a live venue. Can you talk about that a little more, and just describe what it is like overseas to cover esports in these larger venues, and with the way the sports have taken off? And you're in Germany, you can speak to wherever you've been to.
So I cover, we at the Esports Observer, we cover esports on a global basis because it is a global industry. And so much of, esports really got its start in South Korea. That's still considered, the pinnacle of esports competition in a lot of games and titles from, not only a talent perspective, but also an infrastructure perspective. And I think the thing that makes esports really unique, and I think difficult for people that aren't familiar with esports to really understand from a live spectating experience, is you have this really interesting dichotomy where the actual competitors are sitting on a stage in front of a computer, and they're not very interesting to look at because they're clicking a mouse and they have a headset on. A lot of times they're in a solid glass booth so that they can't hear the commentary. So they're kind of separated from the players, and all the action is taking place on a big digital screen, sort of the Jumbotron that you see at a basketball arena will actually have the gameplay on it. So it's a very unique experience. But if you are, once you've been to one, that dichotomy becomes very natural, and you're very used to watching up here and then watching down here for the player reaction to something that goes on. And I think it helps people really get it, I think, is one of the things that live events really do very well. Rick Fox famously has talked a lot about not really understanding esports until he attended a League of Legends match with his son, and then dove headfirst into investing in a team and really, becoming sort of an evangelist for the esports space. And I think having that live aspect, especially in regions that have really embraced esports more. If you go back and you watch on YouTube the opening ceremonies from the 2014 League of Legends World Championship, which was held in Seoul, South Korea, and you see 40,000 people in an open air arena cheering their heads off as Imagine Dragons sings a song that they wrote about League of Legends, with fireworks and dancers going nuts for some kids about to, some kids about to play video games. I think it really highlights where this industry is heading and why, to people that are in the esports space, attending a live esports match it has little separation from attending the Super Bowl or any other major sporting event.
Wow. The Super Bowl, you don't hesitate to compare it in that space.
If watching a League of Legends World Champion opening ceremony, if you watch the 2019 League of Legends opening ceremony and compare that to the weekend's performance at the Super Bowl this year, League of Legends wins every time. Okay. The spectacle and the technology that's involved in these digital performances, it's really a unique experience.
What places have you been able to travel? Part of being a sports writer for me was always I was going from place, just flying around the country, covering different sports that it wasn't always fun, but I did enjoy the travel. Do you travel in covering these sports?
Absolutely, yeah, and I've been able to travel to Berlin, where the Esports Observer is based. We're a German company. I'm one of our U.S. correspondents, actually based in North Carolina. Okay. But I've been able to travel to Berlin and stay there for a period of time as a result of my work here. I've been able to travel to Canada to cover the Rainbow Six World Championship, to Minnesota for Call of Duty. There's those opportunities will only continue to increase. There's a big event in Dubai later this year that we potentially will be sending representatives to. The League of Legends World Championship will be held in China again. The Dota 2 World Championship will be in Stockholm, Sweden. So it's absolutely an industry where if you're covering the biggest games and the biggest tournaments, either your outlet has a global correspondent team like we do, so that we can send local people to local events, or you're going to be a world traveler, as Brian mentioned, his colleague Jacob Wolf, who has ticked off every box I can imagine under the sun in terms of traveling for esports.
Brian, is that part of what you enjoy about your job?
Yeah, I love getting the opportunity to travel. I think, I haven't been covering esports for as long as Trent, so, I haven't traveled to as many events. I've been fortunate that, I'm based in Los Angeles, where there are a lot of esports competitions that take place. So, Overwatch League was based out here for the first couple of years. So I would go out to, Blizzard Arena to watch that. LCS is based in Santa Monica, so I would go watch games there. And as far as traveling elsewhere, I went to Oakland last year for a fighting games competition to watch Smash Melee and Smash Ultimate. And I went to Minnesota a couple of years ago. So there was an Apex Legends tournament that was going on concurrently with the X Games at the new football stadium there in Minnesota. So that was really cool to see. So yeah, those have been like the main places that I've traveled to.
Right. the traveling aside, the money involved in this industry, we touched on it a little bit at the start of the conversation. Where do you see that trend going in terms of I joke a lot about it being $1 billion industry, but where do you see this industry going in terms of the revenues, and is it continuing to grow at the same pace as people were expecting 10 years ago? Because it was, the projections were by 2021 it's a $1 billion industry, and you know, cast your nets, you know, go for the gold, invest in this industry. Is that the same conversation in 2021 for the projections over the next 10 years? Are people still gun-ho about this industry, I guess, is the question. And
I think it's hard. I think it's hard not to be. You know, there were a lot of things that you know, we mentioned the Super Bowl before. Early in esports, you know, 5 years ago, there were a lot of comparisons that the League of Legends World Championship was watched more than the Super Bowl, and things like that. There were sort of misleading statistics that maybe gave some people a false impression of just how big esports was at the time. And some of those things I think have become more in line, but we just saw, you know, in 2018, the owners of the Patriots were willing to drop $25 million reportedly to get involved with the Overwatch League. And we continue to see major investments being made in esports organizations. We're writing about multi-million-dollar investments every single month that are coming into this space. So there's definitely still an interest in esports and getting involved in esports. I think probably the biggest change that's happened in some of those projections is a lot of the conversation in those early projections was that the thing that was going to make esports explode was going to be media rights, because that's how sports makes all of its money, is selling TV rights. And obviously esports on TV has not become the cultural norm here that it is in Korea and other places. And we're probably still a ways off from figuring that out. And even on the streaming side, exclusive streaming deals aren't, you know, the norm for esports competition. But Activision Blizzard and the Overwatch League was able to sign a major deal with YouTube which has exclusive rights to broadcast the Overwatch League. So a lot of that money is in the space, but it's not to the same degree that it is in traditional sports. And so now a lot of the questions are more, what are the other revenue streams that we have in this space in sponsorships and merchandise sales and these other things that get the industry to where we're expecting it to be?
What are fans telling you they want to know more about when they write into your to your online, when they send you messages? What do they want to know? What do the fans of esports want to know? What do they want you guys writing about? What do they have the most questions about?
I mean, I would say that fundamentally, if you're a fan of esports, just like traditional sports, like you want to know more about your favorite players and your favorite teams. Like I think that's
really, okay.
You know, the storytelling aspect. You know, people want to know, you know, what's going on with, you know, I don't know, Tens, who's a player, you know, a Valorant player for Sentinels, right? You know, people want to know about their favorite players and teams. So I think the storytelling aspect, at least from my end, you know, covering the competition, that's something that, you know, fans care about. And, you know, they want to know about streamers too. You know, I think that's sort of a more of a Wild West still, you know, as far as like covering streamers and what goes on with them and their streams and the games that they're playing. You know, I'll let Trent speak about the business side, but I think that there's obviously a lot of interest there too, as far as like, you know, with your question earlier about, where the money's going and where the investments are going. But on the competition side, people want to know about, the teams and the players that they care about.
Storytelling.
Yeah.
Trent, just get 1 second before you jump in. The storytelling aspect is very dear to my heart, and in terms of journalists wanting to get into that story, you don't have to enter in, you don't have to lose that aspect of what you like about journalism to write about esports. Is right, Brian? Is that I would not have thought that. I learned something new there. Can you talk about that just a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. And, part of that is, I think my background, like that's also something that's dear to my heart.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've seen with like the stories that we've published on Nerd Street, like the stories that really take off for us on Twitter, or the ones that get picked up on Reddit, are those stories that are about particular players or particular teams. We wrote a story about this young Valorant player for 100 Thieves, Asuna. He is a sort of a young up and coming star in the world of Valorant, and he plays for a big org in 100 Thieves. And that story got picked up on Reddit. It did really well on Twitter for us. And I think it just kind of speaks to the interest of the fans. It's like in traditional sports, people want to know who are the next up and coming stars, who's the hot rookie. So I think it's a similar thing in esports.
I think the storytelling I think what's really important to get across there is esports is sports for people who don't like sports. Like there's a section of kids and adults that don't watch basketball, but want the storylines that only come with competition. The story of Brett Favre having an incredible game shortly after his father passed away. We literally have a similar version of that story in League of Legends. The story of a kid who dreamed his entire life of pulling himself out of poverty because of his talent in football. I'd like to introduce you to Dimes in the NBA 2K League. Epic rivalries and betrayals of friends who were teammates who went to separate teams and became bitter rivals with one another. It's the story of OG and Dota 2. The exact same storylines that you have in traditional sports that are really the reason that people watch exist one for one in esports. And so I think we as esports have not done as great a job of conveying those stories to the outside world, because it is hard to get past that these stories are taking place on a virtual stage. And if you spend too much time talking about the nitty gritty of the strategy of Dota 2, you lose something of that emotional story. But those stories are there, and there are people telling them, and that's something that we definitely need more of, is people telling the stories that resonate from a human perspective, that are the reason that people love sports more so than the deep level strategy of how you use your offensive line or something. And that exists in esports, and it's the reason that it resonates with people, and it's the reason that esports is only going to continue to grow, is because people want those stories, and the next generation wants them to come from a digital platform.
Thank you. I find that answer very reassuring for young journalists, and I really appreciate that. We have a question from Colston Rogerson. How does the amateur leagues popularity and news cycle on esports compare to generic sports?
It's definitely less, I would say, because there's not a direct line from, so amateur, I think the analog to amateur esports would probably be collegiate sports. So in football, if you want to be a pro football player, you go play for a college. That is not true in esports. There's not a direct line from a set amateur league to the professional league. There's not that direct feeder line because a lot of pro players are 16 to 18 years old.
Right.
So they're being picked out of, sometimes amateur teams, but sometimes they're being picked up off of an online ladder that a player discovers them on and thinks they have talent and they get developed that way. So there are definitely minor leagues and there are regional leagues, which I think is maybe more of what's covered. So like in Europe, there is a regional league for League of Legends where there's the professional league that covers all of Europe and has 10 teams that have the best players in Europe in it. And then the next level of that is Spain has a league and the UK has a league and Poland has a league. And so you have, I think, popularity there where if I'm from Spain, I want to know who the best team in Spain is. So I'm going to watch the Spanish league. But I think here, there's probably less of that because we don't have that same direct feeder system that's, parallel to what collegiate athletics is.
Cool. Got a couple really good questions for you from the audience. Isaac Mason says, what can esports journalists do to draw in more viewers and players from the traditional sports scene or the general public?
So I'll take this one. I think that this was kind of sort of a fine line that we sort of walked at ESPN because, we knew that most of the people who were, coming to ESPN to read stories, tended to be traditional sports fans and not necessarily esports fans. So, we were trying to sort of write stories that catered to an esports audience, of course, but we also wanted to make sure that, we didn't get bogged down in sort of the nitty gritty of like, the strategies of different games. We wanted to make sure that our stories were sort of understandable to a more general audience, especially if they were going to be, stories that were picked up, like for the homepage of ESPN.com. So I think it depends on, what site you're writing for, what site you're reading. Like, I think, different sites will sort of have different levels of analysis for esports. And I think if you're trying to cater to a more general audience, a more traditional sports audience, then I think, you do kind of have to, not dumb it down, but I think you want to make sure that, you are speaking to a more general audience and that you're not sort of getting bogged down in the details of the game, which, if you've never played the game or you've never watched the game, then, obviously you're not going to understand and you're going to get turned off right away. So I think it's important that if you're trying to write for a more general audience, especially at the top of the story, you want to make sure that you're making it as welcoming as possible for a broader audience.
I appreciate this question because sometimes I get lost in my print viewpoint of things. Could you elaborate on maybe reporting esports via podcast and radio?
This is something that I think ESPN did a lot of experimenting with. So Brian, I certainly would love to hear your perspective as well. It's definitely something that Sports Business Journal and the Esports Observer take seriously. Esports is a digital form of entertainment. The majority of viewers and consumers of esports content are people that actively listen to podcasts, watch live streams, get most of their entertainment from YouTube and from digital means. So I think if you're covering esports, you need to be serving that audience. So if you don't have, a digital technology component to your coverage, then, you're missing some opportunities there. So yeah, I think it is absolutely an important part of having a robust esports coverage. And there are plenty of podcasts out there, but there's also still a lot of opportunity, I think, especially in the podcast space, to have some more podcasts that cover more than one game. Because like we mentioned before, if I'm a big fan of one game, that's what I'm going to talk about on my podcast. And there aren't as many podcasts that really just cover, fill the ESPN role of, I listen to Mike and they tell me, all of the big headlines from all of the different games. So I think that's an opportunity that someone could really capitalize on.
I think that as far as like the radio, I'm not so sure, but as far as podcasts, like I think that, there's lots of opportunities there to provide coverage. And, I think that, there are some podcasts that are out there, and in fact, here at Nerd Street, like, we just hired a guy by the name of Mitch Reams, who's going to be starting up with us next week. And he hosted several different podcasts. And so part of the reason that we hired him was because of his ability to sort of host these podcasts and, bring on people in the industry for interviews. So I think, having podcasts that are like interview based and, talking about different topics in esports, like I think that's definitely, a good area to sort of expand coverage in.
Thank you. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate the conversation. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience has as well. Really appreciate you taking the time to share your viewpoints. Thank you. Really appreciate it. We're going to log off here. We got 15 minutes before the last session starts. Can you guys let people know how they can reach you if they had some additional questions or want to make contact?
Sure. So let me drop my email here in the chat, but basically you can reach me via email. So I'll drop my personal email here. I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed this conversation, and best of luck to everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah, this has been great. And thanks, Brian, for all of your insight as well. You can reach me directly on Twitter at Trent_esports. All of my content is available on esportsobserver.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. Writing about esports every single day on esportsobserver.com. So you can see what's going on the business side of esports there. And happy to chat with anybody on social media about the industry. It's, like I said, it's growing and it's exciting to talk about, and those of us in it can talk your ear off forever. So happy to do so.
Thank you so much. You guys take care.
Have a good one.
You too.
Hi, everybody. We're just getting settled here, and then we'll take off with a look at the future of esports. So, panelists, Dr. Lawson Williams and Charity, if you want to join me, that'd be great. There you go. You're unmuted. Perfect.
Good afternoon.
It's great to have you here. Let me just tee us up here a little bit. As we have gone through this day, we've basically gone from the very first panel of being sort of esports 101, the basics of where we are, and then we talked about the college scene and the previous panel. And I want to just say thank you real quick to our panelists. Touched on the journalistic aspect, what's being covered, how it's being covered, and all that sort of stuff. And now we're going to talk a little bit about where you see esports going. And with that, we've got with us Dr. Bernadette Lawson Williams, who has been a driving force at Johnson C. Smith with the development of your esports program there. You also have a great deal of experience. You ran the department there that's sport management and sports related. And so I also find that fascinating relative to esports. And
It's very fascinating.
And we've also got with us Charity Phillips. Hi, Charity, who's interning with MEAC now and is the future of esports right now. So we'll hit you in a minute. Dr. Lawson Williams, I'm interested in when we talk to you about joining this panel, as you think about what esports might look like, 5 or 10 years from now. 10 years from now, we'll be past 2030. Electric cars are going to be the only kind of vehicles that are built in this country. We'll have, alternative energy and all sorts of other things. And I have to imagine that esports is even more part of the sporting landscape than it is now. When you think about that, what comes to mind?
Well, what I actually have to admit is that it has been very challenging for me to convince my colleagues in sport management that esports are actually sports. So that's actually what I'm dealing with now.
Right. So you're at that point.
I'm at that point. So we're at the introductory level with a lot of my colleagues. Again, it's just very hard for them to fathom the fact that we are equating traditional sports, basketball, golf, tennis, with electronic sports, Fortnite, Call of Duty. Mm-hmm. And so even to the point of it not even being a discussion in any of our courses. And so I've been very excited to be a part of a building platform to educate my sport management colleagues about the esports and gaming industry, a multi-billion-dollar industry, as we all know. But for them, they aren't sold. And so that has really been my plight over the past, I would say, year, just trying to educate them and to engage them in conversation about the industry, where it is now and where it's going, and wanting them to be on board for that ride.
What kind of arguments do you use in terms of selling esports as the future?
Well, I just break down the definition of sport as we all learned it, and there are 3 elements involved in sport. There has to be some element of physicality, codified rules, as well as competition. And so, although for many of them, the level of physicality, the fine motor skills that we use in esports just does not equate to them with the amount of gross motor skills or large muscle groups that we use in traditional sports. So a lot of them are just having a hard time with that alone. And they just, again, cannot get over the fact that we are equating, video games, as they say. You know, you mean
Mhm.
this Pac-Man that I used to play back in the day? And I'm a gamer's girl from the 80s. So I actually played those games and I was very good at those games as well. So for them, I think that's where they're getting stuck. They're also getting stuck on a lot of the commonalities that we have, the esports industry and the sport industry with regards to the spectatorship. That's one part. You know, for me, that's an easy sell. And so when I'm showing them that there are arenas full of esports fans, even in comparison to a lot of traditional sports where you can't fill up arenas, sadly, some teams can't fill up arenas anymore. And so for them, I think that's the most exciting part of it, that, wow, you know, we really can't compete with that. You know, that kind of market, that kind of commitment, esports enthusiasts, so individuals who, from the viewership standpoint, that's another big a discussion point, viewership. You know, literally esports coming in only second to viewership of the NFL Super Bowl. And so, you know, I'm constantly coming up with these strong arguments because I'm always ready to debate with my colleagues. It's working a little bit.
Sure. Charity, tell us about your internship and what you're doing with MEAC and your own gaming life. First of all, let's hear a little bit about what you're up to.
Yes. Can you guys hear me good?
Yeah, you're great.
Perfect. I am the intern for MEAC, and I basically help with doing the social media side of things, Discord, YouTube, Facebook. I get it all out there and try to get the students engaged. So that's kind of what we've been doing. As far as my own personal gaming, I am new to esports myself. I have played video games all of my life, but just not competitively. And so right now, for me personally, I'm a speedrunner. So this is a total different field for me. It's taking a little adjustment, but I'm actually having a lot of fun doing it.
That's great. What's the community like for you? Have they been welcoming? Have they been? Have you felt like it's a good space for you?
Yeah, they've been very welcoming. I think one of the issues that we've been running into is getting people to actually understand how to use the Discord mostly, you know, getting in there, you know, getting to meet new people. That's kind of the thing that we've been running into. But I do feel like, you know, once people get the hang of it, get in there, meet some new people, kind of get into whatever group of games they want to be in, I think it'll hit off and go well.
That's great. I just want to say I'm going to invite Chris Green, who is in one of our earlier panels, to join us. There he is. Chris, you were so amazing this morning. And I just know that you have thoughts about where we're going in the esports world. Let me just start generally about what you're thinking in terms of, we have a bomber behind you.
I know he's supposed to be reading right now, so he's fine.
It's great. Yeah, we're, you know, when you think about sort of, I mean, this broad strokes kind of question, but when you think about 10 years from now, what do you envision, you know, the top esports competition looking like, or the way we're playing games?
I think that probably brings up to, I think, the topic we talked earlier about games in general, where, like I said, the traditional games, even in esports like basketball, football, are pretty much the same rules, versus you think of Call of Duty, Fortnite, Rocket League, you know, those publishers, like I said, they're pretty much the gods of those games, and they can make up the rules and change the rules whenever they feel of it. Granted, they will stick by some guidelines, but when it comes to the future of it, hopefully we will have, and there is some talk of it, some guidelines for esports to be stagnant or so, or just have the same rules applied. Granted, whatever the game publishers may want to change, but whenever those matches compete, you know, we still appear by those. So hopefully in the future we'll get there. Right now, like I said in the earlier panel, we're still a grassroots in that space. So it's just one of those, hopefully we'll see the future become standardized. It'd probably be the best way to say it.
Yeah. And John,
Let me just give a quick note. Darren and Taryn and Edward. Derek is among our attendees. If we can pull him in as a panelist, that'd be great. I'm sorry to cut you off, Doctor.
oh, no problem. I'm just going to say that the future, for us is really already here when we're looking at the opportunity for esports to debut at the Olympics, hopefully this year, if that's still going to be the case, with Street Fighter and Rocket League are supposed to be making a debut, not as an actual contest, but as a part of the Olympic Games events. And I think that's very exciting to put it on a global platform, which is already on a global platform, but just from the standpoint of now everyone understanding that it's on a global platform.
That's a great point. That's an amazing breakthrough when you talk about globalization, which is I just wrote down a few words that I wanted to ask about. And globalization, it's, with the Overwatch League having teams, from branded as Seoul and London, and in addition to the United States, and then having the Olympics. I mean, if it's an Olympic sport, it by definition is global, right? So there we have it. I'd just like to welcome Derek Watson, from the co-founder of High Point Gamer, who's produced many high-profile esports events to the panel. Welcome, Derek. And I'd be interested, I think we haven't heard from somebody who really produces events today. And so it might be interesting for you to just tell us a little bit about that, and how the development it has evolved, and where do you see it evolving?
So where it's at right now, we know that the pandemic has of changed the game quite a bit to where everyone has gone virtual as far as producing events, except for the few brave ones that still are doing in-person events. I think that because of the transition where everyone got into esports from an investment standpoint, real estate standpoint, scholastic standpoint, right before the pandemic hit, it put a lot of plans on hold, and therefore those plans had to be changed and adjusted to fit the new norm, because those that are in esports, as pioneers, we didn't want esports to die, and we recognize that the value that it could still bring virtually, right? So even though we changed our game plan, we still want to go back to our original game plan on executing the in-person and live things that we previously invested, strategized around, etc. So to me, reintroducing that will be the new norm or the future of esports when that possibility comes back, where we're back to normal, and then the evolution onto the next level of esports that includes things outside of playing video games, such as Hadu, which is like virtual AR dodgeball. I think that will become the definition of esports, where you encompass electronic competition in general. And the future is, now that we're seeing more minority participation, that is going to be the future as well. And then, since everyone is trying to figure out diversity and inclusion in the space, to get more inclusion in the space, which means there's going to be some division at first while everyone gets it right, and then that is going to come together to then be another segment or progression of esports to really show off what we've been saying about esports, about the diversity and inclusion and openness to that. Hey, we all can compete together, whether you're in a wheelchair, whether you're a female and a male, etc. So that's the future that I see for esports.
That's fascinating. It hits right on the next phrase I had was inclusion, and it feels like that's, from listening to the panelists today, when it comes to women, when it comes to people of color, that's an area that the industry is really trying to get its arms around and figure out the way to just make everybody feel like they can play.
I believe when it comes to inclusion, we're currently getting it wrong because we think it's about, let's focus on females, for example. We think that the the story around that is there aren't really females playing video games, so we need to do more to get them interested in video games to enter into the space. And that's not true. There are tons of females that play video games just by looking at the stats. The problem, however, is that in the space of video games, when it comes to multiplayer and competitive gaming, we're talking about you have the digital divide that you have to get over, one. Two, once you're included in that space because you're not hindered by the digital divide, you are then trying to find your voice or acceptance of your voice within that space because you're not included. So that's the problem. The problem is there's females that are playing video games, but because of the atmosphere of online, the original toxic environment before social media was toxic, once a female speaks on the microphone, that audience that isn't used to having females speak on the microphone then acts like they don't know how to act around females, which then makes female, you know what, I'd rather not have my microphone on. Or you get the ones that are super brave that's like, you know what, I don't care, I'm going to be able to deal with this, but I'm going to be heard. And if you're not heard on an online aspect of esports, that makes you not part of the community, right? And if you don't feel part of the community, then you miss out on opportunities of, or thinking of opportunities like esports to engage with, because you're like, hey, if I'm not recognized amongst my peers or accepted amongst my peers, why am I going to put myself on a national platform or a larger platform to feel that rejection or exclusion on a much bigger scale? Like what person wants to do that except for the pioneers that don't mind taking those blows? So currently esports acts like we need to educate females and do something to get, like, no, we need to change the environment so that the females that are there feel like they're there, and thus they champion for more females to be included and be a part of this ecosystem that is about being inclusive.
Dr. Lawson Williams, your thoughts?
Well, I'm excited to see the number of esports and gaming organizations that really are stepping in and stepping up. And I have to give kudos to our partner, Riot Games. It was just literally a private message that I sent to a Riot Games representative, and she got right back to me. And the next week we had the entire Riot Games team on a Zoom call, and we were going into partnership with them, JCSU's esports and gaming trifecta. And so through that conversation, it led us to receiving 25 gaming chairs for our esports and gaming lab, the first at an HBCU, as well as 5 summer internships, which are paid. So, you know, our students are excited about that. And so it was just a perfect connection between our academic esports and gaming management program and, of course, our competitive program. So the opportunities for us have really been unlimited. I mean, we are literally being universities and colleges that are well known throughout the nation, that are high ranking. From a traditional sports standpoint, they're NCAA Division I. We always talk about that. And so, you know, Johnson C. Smith is NCAA Division II. And so we're excited that what would previously have not been an opportunity for us to play a Virginia Tech or a Virginia Commonwealth University through esports, anything is possible, because the playing field, as Derek said, once you get, you know, away from the digital divide, and once we bring that digital divide and close it, then there are unlimited opportunities for success for everyone.
That's great. I'm gonna ask, Derek sort of mentioned AR in passing. I'm interested in your thoughts on next steps as far as the games themselves. The pace of creation of new and popular games just seems furious. It just churns incredibly. And so, even at our in our college here at Penn State, we are screwing around with virtual reality and things like that. I know that it's hard to predict what any given developer will create, but are there things that you see that are catching on, generally speaking, that types of games or styles of games that you can see coming down in the future that might be interesting and gain a lot of attention as time goes on? I'll just throw that out to anybody.
So 2 thoughts on when it comes to the game space and relates to esports and competition, I see developers are going to need to transition away from the model of a new game, new game, new game, new game each year, because if you spend up, like let's say 60 million to enter into a league, and then that game isn't the game in 2 years or 5 years, you're very pissed off, and your team is upset, and all the resource that you put towards that is upset. So therefore, developers are need to move into a model of here's the game, and as we improve it or add different competitive aspects, that is what changes over the course of the span of the game. So therefore, the league can stay the same pretty much around the game, but just the aspects on how we compete on the game changes versus throwing a game away is one. Two, uh, Marcus Howard is who I go to when it comes to predicting new games for me. Like he has the eye, he understands what makes a great game. And now that he is in the esports space, he's recognizing what games make sense from an esports standpoint. So I definitely see that audience or that world of developers are churning away currently as we speak to create more esports titles, because more esports titles are needed, because not everyone can pay the 63 million to be inside of a league. So therefore that leaves this nice big market for indie esports game to thrive and succeed off of, while us little guys that don't have 63 million for a league can still service our community, can still represent scholastically with the esports team and activation.
Dr. Lawson Williams, do you have any?
I would like to acknowledge that we're starting to see a lot more characters in esports and video games of color. And so that does show that change is happening. And we, of course, want to see change continue. But I did want to acknowledge that. What I would like to see more of is esports and video gaming companies looking at cross-platform opportunities. So instead of PC games primarily, let's make sure that we're looking out for our console gamers, our mobile gamers as well. We have seen mobile games start to break off, particularly because of the pandemic. It's one of the many gifts of the pandemic. So, you know, my kids are right now in the hotel room with their mobile games going on. And so we just know that growth is going to continue to augment. And so in understanding that, those dynamics, hopefully the video game companies are looking at that and wanting to make sure, as Derek was alluding to before, that there's complete inclusivity. So there is no digital divide. Everyone is included. Everyone has access to all of the esports. I think we're going to see the level of competition step up when we get to that point.
The digital divide and access just, continually seem to be a massive issue. And as we get, as you say, as that gets solved, we will have a new landscape with new cars and more people playing,
I will say, when it comes to the future of esports, the digital divide problem can't be while everyone else is on 5G, we finally getting you up to 4G or whatever we were on prior to that, because the technology is going to still be a divide. You know what I mean? It's not just give everyone internet access. No, you need a certain speed, you need a certain bandwidth, etc., to participate in the space.
That's right. And then, of course, your normal computer won't really be able to accommodate these games. And so I know for some of our students, they were in the midst of a Rocket League match and the computer crashed. Now, thank goodness the student was a computer engineering major because he got the computer up and running. But I mean, think of that in the midst of competition, and you have a person that just has a regular desktop. They can't go up against somebody that actually has a gaming PC. And so we just have to keep those kinds of things in mind. And they affect competition, the quality of competition, consistent competition. And so I think when we can fix those, ameliorate those situations, and we're seeing it now with our esports club. As I said, we literally came into the space last year, played our first match in October, and by December, we were actually gaming and winning tournaments, and it was just from that level of competition stabilizing. And so we see that across the board, particularly with our HBCUs. We see it a lot with our PWIs, but because HBCUs are really just starting to get into the competitive esports and gaming space, if we see more consistency with the types of technology that they're provided, then we're going to see better gameplay and better quality of competition.
Interesting. We're getting down to the bottom of the hour, and so I just want to say to our students who are attending the seminar, please come forward with your questions in Q&A or chat, and we'll pick them up and pass them on to the panelists. Really happy to do that. I'm interested in just in how COVID impacted your gaming lives, because I know it was really varied from someone from, my experience basically, ended at Miss Pac-Man and then picked up again with Madden, basically. So there was more time to play. So at first that was a thing, but I'm just interested in whether that at the end of the day, in some ways, did esports benefit from COVID in that it was a way to be social together, or is a pandemic a bad thing no matter what, and people are just sort of stuck and it doesn't work that well.
So for me personally, it kind of boosted a lot for the esports. Even just for me personally as a gamer, I was able to be better social with people, especially with Discord. Discord is the #1 spot to be social. So it was able to bring people together and kind of learn different new faces, different things. I really feel like, as time progresses, hopefully that we can get back into person, but having esports virtual is not a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it really helped it a lot.
So I think the pandemic was probably twofold. It benefited in a way that it gave room for other individuals to get into the space, but then also there were a lot of people that really believed in esports, that put a lot of money into investing in the esports, and those people are no longer around because their resources were dried up because of the pandemic. Another benefit of the pandemic is it dried up some individuals that were just in the space because they thought it would make a lot of money and they weren't authentically interested in the success of the space, and it moved them out of the way as well. So I see it twofold. I see it benefited in some ways, and overall, we're headed in the right direction. It's still around. We still got a lot of progress and moves to make.
That's a really interesting insight, that the drying up of the money has a two-pronged aspect, Dr. Lesson Williams.
Yes, I think it did help to shine the light on some inadequacies that exist within the industry. But I think, as some of my students in the club would say, we haven't been on campus since last March. And so for them, they feel like one of the gifts of the pandemic was team cohesion, that they were forced to be a team, to solidify themselves as a team, because guess what? They couldn't go over to the person's dorm room. They literally had to communicate, using various modes, whether it was telephone, whether it was Discord, but there was no going over and connecting with one another in person. So although we did lose that in-person crowd experience in arenas that were filling up, we definitely gained, I think from our standpoint, some element of stability. There were sponsorships that were sadly lost for a lot of companies, and I'm even seeing some companies continue to have cutbacks for their staff members. But I think if anything, we're going to stand to gain more in the end, because we've had time to now lay the groundwork to sort of come back to that place of everyone being on the same page. And so I really see that the future is very bright for esports and gaming from here on out.
So we have a question from Tyreek Turner, and Charity's already given him a little answer in chat, but I'll throw it out to Dr. Lesson Williams and Derek. How hard is it for an esports player to, quote, make it to the top compared to a person who plays traditional sports? Is it easier for an esports player to make it into a professional league than it is for a football, basketball player to make it to the NFL, NBA?
I'm going to say, and to be the best is not easy at all, regardless of whether you're traditional sports or esports. I think also technology has changed the playing field, especially from a influence and being recognized standpoint. So the challenge in esports, which I think now the challenge for traditional sports as well, is not just going to be able to play well, but to be recognized amongst the space of people that are played well, and actually bring value from a sponsorship and endorsement and an ROI revenue standpoint. Because when it comes to esports, having the best player, I'd rather have a mediocre player that's good at engaging and get following and make the sponsors happy than I am to have the person that has, from a stat standpoint, the best, that can engage, that doesn't post on social media, that doesn't recognize that it's a business, etc.
Dr. Lawson-Williams?
I think for me, and I actually just perused content related to how hard it is to make it to the NFL. You know, just starting out as a student in high school, and your chances of making it to an NCAA school on a scholarship event, your chances of making it into the NFL. And I actually worked for the NFL for a little while, so I remember talking to some of the players about that. So even in relating that element of traditional sports back to esports and gaming, I think one of the vast differences is a lot of parents will not allow their children to practice esports or to practice participating in esports like you would have a parent allow their children to practice basketball in preparation for NBA dreams or NFL dreams. So when we really get down to the bottom line, I think that's going to have to change. Parents are going to have to start viewing esports athletes as athletes, and that's it. Don't worry about the esports. And you know, there are disadvantages on both sides. I know for many parents, just the lack of physical mobility, the eye soreness, eye fatigue. But then when we look at ACL injuries and all the other injuries that come with the traditional sport, you know, we're going to have to come up with a parallel in order to really get those esports athletes to the point where they can actually feel comfortable with, you know, gaming professionally. We're going to have to make sure that they're committing their time to practicing just as much as a traditional sport athlete.
I want to throw in one more thing in regards to traditional sports. So I had a student that was, he was doing real well at football, right? And he thought because he was doing real well at football and it came time for graduation, he knew, like, I'm gonna go play in college. And when that time came, he didn't have any offers to go anywhere. And he was back to ground zero, where he's struggling to get through the depression of not making it because he thought he was going to make it to college. And because he didn't do well scholastically, he couldn't go to college because he was banking on football. If you change just one thing in that equation from traditional sport football player to an esports player, they would have been able to, one, generate revenue throughout the process so that he could have money to go to college. He would have developed skills to understand branding, content creation. He would have built a network outside of where he lived so that he's able to connect with other people that could put him on to opportunities outside of his community.
Good point. And possibly
Really
even a scholarship opportunity.
Yep.
Another question came in, and I'm going to throw it to Charity. Are there internships in the development of esports? So I'll ask our intern.
Yes, absolutely. I will say this from somebody who is going for a social work degree. I'm not going anywhere near into gaming. I was at one point, but then I decided to change degrees. There is always internships, scholarships. There's always opportunities in esports. A little bit of background on how I became the MEAC intern. I am a college student of NCCU, which is North Carolina Central University. We are starting a esport league at our school. So just me making our school Discord is how I became intern with the MEAC. So it's also getting to the point now where I just had an interview for an actual pay position for another gaming organization because they sponsored to build our esport league this past Monday. So it's all about who you know. You know, you want that connection. You want to be able to put yourself out there and meet new people. Because it's just going to keep growing. It's going to keep growing. There's always opportunities out there.
Really interesting answer.
And that's economic empowerment at the end of the day.
That's right. That's right. And someone asked a sort of parallel question about what we talked about this a little bit earlier in our college scene Q&A, but what do you see the gaming companies doing at the college level to ensure interest in the future, which may have something to do with interns at some point along the line? But what are you observing, and what do you anticipate as far as the college scene goes, and the relationship between that and gaming companies and developers?
Well, I can speak on that from a standpoint. Again, we are partnering with Riot Games. We're looking at opportunities to partner with Epic Games as well. So we're constantly, week after week, in conversation with one of the leading global esports and gaming companies. A lot of it, to me, has to do with just asking. You have to reach out many times to the companies. Oftentimes you might get an email from someone who wants to engage the university, but I think a lot of it has to do with the university wanting to engage the gaming companies for opportunities. And so that's always what I'm looking for, opportunities for our students. And so, like I said, we have the 5 paid summer internships with Riot Games, and it really only happened through conversations. These gaming companies can't understand what your needs are unless you understand what your needs are, and you're willing to communicate those needs and wanting to collaborate. So as Charity said, I'm actually a 4th generation Bulldog, South Carolina State University, which is a MEAC school. So I'm excited that they're participating. I also attended law school at NCCU. So I'm excited to see HBCUs really get into this space and really thrive. But again, it's the opportunities are out there. It's just a matter of the conversation, and that engagement has to happen in order for the collaborations and partnerships to be solidified. And so we also just solidified a partnership with Point 3, a performance apparel company based out of Atlanta. They designed our jerseys and gifted us with jerseys, as well as CD Collection, an African American owned eyewear company based out of Dallas, Texas. They just gifted us with gaming eyewear. And so they're our official sponsors for our esports club. And again, just all started with a conversation and an ask. I'm never afraid to ask. You can say no, but I'm going to ask because it's all about our students and their success.
And when it comes to gaming companies, for success of the industry, they definitely need to recognize that the collegiate space isn't just a lead generation space. Recognize the college space as part of the ecosystem, meaning that instead of just trying to engage so you can figure out how to make more money off of a market, figure out how you can put more money into these people's hands so that they can be a responsible engager of your brand in the future. That's how success happens, and that's how you create a true industry and a true system, by circulating that dollar, not just trying to suck it out of that industry.
That's a great point. We think about esports and gaming as sort of a self-bred industry. Kids start gaming at 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. They're really in training for jobs that entire time. And so it's been really fascinating to see what their passion really is, them be able to connect that with career opportunities. So they would be gaming in their dormitory rooms regardless. And so it's just that now that we have a curriculum, we can actually expose them to the content related to esports and gaming, and they can connect the dots. And then once we have the internship and job opportunities lined up for them, it's just a matter of us making sure that they're ready to interview because the opportunities are out there.
That's a good point.
That's a great point. Let me, we've only got 5 minutes left, and I want to have a moment for a wrap-up question, but while we've got Derek, I just feel like I've got to ask you a little bit about live events, and if there's anything coming out of the pandemic that you feel like you've learned about, like how it's going to change, and when we're going to. I'm not asking you to predict the course of the virus, but sort of the idea of where we're gonna, where this is gonna go once we get back to live events. There's, the arena in Philly and that sort of thing, and it feels like we were primed for like a real blossoming. And if that's what we can look forward to.
So my secret sauce, as far as the current situation with esports, is most people, when they jump in, they want to do a tournament, and you ask them how big, and they want a big tournament, whatever that means. There's a bunch of people and a bunch of competitors being inside of a tournament. The pandemic has shown or given us the opportunity where you're able to scale that down and focus on the production and then the content that comes from that event afterwards to get that engagement that you want, because we really want a bunch of people engaging with it. I don't need a bunch of people live, just a bunch of people engaging. And so therefore, if I do well with a smaller tournament that's live and in person, up the production value, which is still smaller than the production value of a bunch of people, right? And then produce that content, distribute that content to then be further engaged, I've accomplished the same mission. And I think that's the space that many organizations need to go towards.
That's a great point. I mean, who wants to have thousands of bored people? You'd rather have a smaller crowd that's really into it and comes out of it with having a great experience, you know?
And I've attended one of Derek's events, so I can attest. They're phenomenal.
That's awesome. We have Isaac Mason has asked a question: are celebrity endorsements part of the equation for bringing attention to the sports scene? Example, Rick Fox and Imagine Dragons, NFL players and Madden tournaments, that sort of thing. How important are they?
Just from a person who just did a tournament with a celebrity, it's very important. That brings the hype to get the people involved, especially in games like Call of Duty. Again, I participated in a tournament where we did duos, and my partner was a huge eSport African Latino women, which was perfect for me. And other celebrities like Soulja Boy was there, stuff like that, and that brought the hype. It brought the attention to it. So I think that's a good thing to sort of have to the side as well.
Cool.
So I'm kind of anti that, only because the celebrity part to me is needed to support the brands and make them understand why they need to be in the space and support the space, as well as from a PR standpoint. But I believe celebrities already have their opportunity where they shine. So therefore, including them or allowing them to get a check in esports to further the industry exclude someone else that really could use that opportunity to be in the space from an economic inclusion standpoint. Like, I get it from a brand standpoint, but from a life enhancement and community engagement standpoint, I am anti celebrity endorsement from a check standpoint, when I can pay another kid that's trying to go to college or get to college or just pay their rent and they're into gaming authentically.
Yeah, I concur as well. Particularly if they're requesting to be paid. Now, if they're donating their time, and those, celebrities are esports athletes, so they actually enjoy playing these games authentically. Come on, we love it. Jalen Smith, who actually plays for the Dallas Cowboys, is actually the co-founder of the company that's serving as our gaming eyewear provider. So that's been pretty cool. He's a gamer. And so him being a part of creating this gaming eyewear, that's really phenomenal. So I love those kinds of endorsement affiliation opportunities, but just to come into the space, and I did reach out to another NFL athlete. I was thinking as his agent was going to actually bring him on board as someone who would just assist and who would just lend his name to a great cause. But one of the first questions was, now, how much exactly is your budget? And I was like, okay, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question. We are at time, so I just thought we just go around the panel real quick and just offer a little advice or encouragement as we look to the future to the students who are watching the webinar, and your thoughts about the gaming industry or the eSports industry, and I misspoke, and reasons to be interested in it, or a piece of advice on how to get involved if they're interested. So Dr. Lawson Williams, do you want to start us out?
Yes. Well, as an academician, I always have to advocate for preparation. And so I would say a purposeful preparation, particularly for those who are gamers. You're already passionate about gaming. And so this is just an opportunity for you to transform your passion in gaming, whether leisurely or competitively, into a lucrative career. For non-gamers, I encourage you to research, really try to connect with gaming with authenticity. I know a lot of times you hear about it being a multi-billion-dollar industry, and that automatically makes you want to gravitate towards it, but don't do it for that reason. Make sure that you're connecting to some element of esports and gaming organically. And then from there, if there is a passion that has been born from that, then you can pursue those kinds of career opportunities.
Charity?
My advice is to, if you're a gamer, you're already doing it, have fun. So why not, do it to get other opportunities, internships, scholarships, if you want to make it a career, whatever have you. And if you're not, you can use your degree for something into gaming. I'm actually thinking about using my social work degree to help out our gamers because they go through mental health issues too. They're just like anybody else. So you can help out that way. If you're a physical therapist, you can help with their hands or sit in the chair or whatever, it's so many other opportunities besides just like the gaming and the technology side. You can still be involved in it some way or another. So just, put yourself out there and the sky's the limit. It's what you put in is what you're going to get out.
Chris, what do you think?
I'm gonna speak to, like I said earlier, and my panel earlier is two sides of the house, front of the house, back of the house. Don't always think that the front of the house is always gonna be successful. The back of the house will also be successful as well. So like Derek as being a production person, Professor Lawson Williams being in the academic side, Charity, prime example of working as an intern and actually looking at other opportunities, whether it be in gaming or not. There are multiple ways where gaming can take you, and that gaming path, I should say, is always open to multiple opportunity and possibilities that you will not see, but also, let's say, just get you a better opportunity, pretty much.
Right. And Derek, you get the last word. Oh, can't hear you.
There you go. My tip is look at it from an industry standpoint and recognize that because of the pandemic and because of technology, the opportunities for us from an economic standpoint are changing. And therefore, you need to grasp any type of advancement that's going to be around at least 20 years that you can make money off of, be successful in, contribute to, help the community in, etc. There isn't a better space than that than esports currently. So therefore, embrace it so you can get your piece of the pie, benefit, help sustain it so that it can be sustainable. There's individuals out here that don't have an opportunity to be recognized or shine outside of video games, and video games gives them that opportunity to be heard and to be seen. And that alone is beneficial for us from a mental health standpoint, community standpoint, and an economic standpoint.
Terrific. Thank you to all our panelists. Chris, thanks for jumping in at the last minute. And
no problem.
I just want to say I learned a lot and really appreciate the opportunity. And I just glad you're back, Professor Robinson. Really, really appreciate you and all your work putting this together, taking the lead on a day where we learned a whole lot. And it's been great. Thanks very much.
Great job,
you.
John.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Yeah.
Just
Thanks.
want to thank all the panelists throughout the day. I really learned a lot from your insights, and the students and all of those who participated, I'm sure, did as well. Just want to take this, all of your takeaways and your last words. And, we're going to wrap up here, and we will be back in touch with each one of you individually. We just to continue this network. If you did not have an opportunity to offer your contact, you can do that as we close out.
So you can find me at High Point Gamer, all one word, on all social media. And website is www.highpointgamer.com. Don't be shy. That is also my gamer tag if you want to get your head bust on Mortal Kombat 11 or some Overwatch.
Yes, and I actually just put my email in the chat. It's blwilliams@jcsu.edu.
Thank you.
I'm typing mine as well in the chat. I've put my email and I'm putting my Discord if you guys are ever in there. That is my Discord, my Twitch, YouTube, Twitter is Ren Adventures. So come by, see some eSport things, see some speed running things, casual gaming. We can have a lot of fun.
Thank you. All righty. You guys have a wonderful evening and you take care.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Alrighty.
Everybody stay safe.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.